250 topics, 6 different levels, and all of the craziest Destiny stories compiled in one video. This is the definitive, mysterious, and disturbing Destiny Iceberg. There are 2 other Iceberg videos on my channel, but this is the comprehensive version that covers everything. We're going to be expanding and giving updates on the previous topics, and also adding plenty of new topics to make this the biggest Destiny Iceberg ever created. And in case you are unaware of how an iceberg works, this is a way of ranking topics based on how well known they are. By the time we sink to the dark below at the very bottom, this stuff is so hidden that almost nobody knows it exists, and some of it is weird, some of it is illegal, and a lot of it is simply disturbing. I put an unbelievable amount of time into creating this behemoth of a video, and I made sure to go down every single rabbit hole in order to make this iceberg truly mind-blowing, so I hope you enjoy. Beginning with the highest point on the iceberg, this is the stuff that Destiny is most famous for. Even if you've never played the game or haven't played it in a while, you might still be familiar with some of the entries at this level. Whether we wanted it or not. This is a monologue that gets read by Commander Zavala whenever you load into a certain strike in Destiny 1. This was one of the longest strike intros of all time, and due to it being drilled into players' minds every single time they played the strike, they quickly memorized it and started copy-pasting it everywhere on the internet. And when I say everywhere, I mean literally everywhere. I'm pretty sure I've read this thing so many times that I could recite it word for word without even thinking about it. This speech has become an inside joke among Destiny players, but it's still this high up on the iceberg because the vast majority of active players definitely know about it. There have been many parody videos created over the years, it has been put on merch like t-shirts and mugs, and Zavala's voice actor, Lance Reddick, even posted an awesome recreation of the monologue to celebrate hitting 100,000 followers.
Whether we wanted it or not, we've stepped into a war with the Cabal on Mars.
The loot cave was just a regular looking cave when Destiny 1 launched, but players quickly discovered that it could be exploited and plundered for endless loot. The news of this discovery spread like wildfire, and soon enough, millions of players were sitting right here and shooting into this cave to collect infinite engrams for hours on end. For whatever reason, enemies would just continually spawn and walk right into your crosshairs, so this made the cave just the perfect place for mindless farming. At the time, in 2014, loot was exceedingly rare and hard to get, so this was a rather attractive and straightforward way for players to gear up and improve their accounts. It's kind of funny to look back on it now because this would be a hilarious waste of time in the modern game of today. Various activities shower us in so much better and more frequent loot that this cave just looks like a joke by comparison. The developers decided to patch this particular loot cave relatively fast, but other loot caves emerged over time. Nowadays, in Destiny 2, one of the dungeons makes a reference to the original loot cave by containing an engram mechanic in the same location. Players need to eliminate waves of enemies who drop all of these fake engrams just like the good old days, and then they deposit the engrams into a crystal to progress forward in the dungeon. Blueberries. This is a term players use when referring to guardians who aren't in their fire team, since they show up as a blueberry-like circle on the radar. Generally though, the term can also be used to refer to any clueless player who is just wandering around and exploring the Destiny universe. Whenever anything goes wrong, it has become a running joke to just blame it on the blueberry, because historically, the new players who aren't in a fire team tend to not really know what is going on. The Trickster. This was a mini-boss and quest during the Forsaken campaign in Destiny 2. She would try to fool players with traps that looked like exotic engrams, but would actually just explode when picked up. The Trickster would eventually become a meme format that was spread even outside the Destiny community, and a few posts like this one became very popular on social media. Destiny 1 concept art. Back in the early days before Destiny was released, Bungie created a lot of fascinating concept art showing characters and environments that we never actually got to see in-game. It's cool to take a look at all of the ideas they explored, and overall, the Bungie art team has always done a fantastic job. You might even want to take one of these awesome pieces of artwork and hang it up on your wall. And luckily, you can do just that with today's sponsor, Displate. Displate creates incredibly high-quality metal posters that are officially licensed from all of your favorite games, movies, and TV shows. I'm sure you'll recognize franchises like Star Wars, Call of Duty, Marvel, Elden Ring, and of course, our topic of today, which is Destiny. Displate officially collaborates with Bungie to create the best possible product. From the classic Traveler art to this awesome portrait of Cayde 6, the Destiny artwork is absolutely fantastic, and I'm loving the ones that I've put up in my room. With over 2 million pieces of artwork, Displate really has an offering for anything, whether you're into cars, anime, cartoons, animals, or any of the other topics that you see listed here. You can also customize them with the textura or glossy looks for added style. The beautiful thing about the metal posters is that they make use of magnets, meaning that there is zero damage to your wall, and you can easily take them down or move them around whenever you want. All posters are printed in Europe, but they still offer a rapid 4 to 5 business day shipping so that you can receive them right away. Go to the link in the description, scan my QR code, or you can use my code on screen. You will get 22% off one Displate, but you can also get a massive 30% off if you get 2 or more. This is a fantastic deal, guys, so be sure to check out Displate. All of their stuff is super high quality and will make a great addition to your room or living space. Gjallarhorn is easily the most well-known exotic weapon in Destiny history. It was absurdly overpowered, but when the game first launched, nobody really knew this. It was sold by the exotic vendor named Xur, but most people just decided to pass up on it and save their coins for a future week. The rationale at the time was that the coins would be better spent on a primary instead of a heavy rocket launcher, since heavy ammo was limited. But aside from acquiring it at Xur, this rocket launcher was just a rare, random drop, and lucky Gjallarhorn drop reactions are some of the craziest videos from way back in the day. Due to it being so incredibly rare, many raid groups would ruthlessly require you to have this weapon in order to join them. If you weren't lucky enough to just have a Gjallarhorn randomly drop for you, you were unfortunately excluded from a lot of raid teams. The Gjallarhorn became so iconic it was featured in a Taco Bell commercial, made into a massive Nerf weapon, and crafted into many real-life replicas, including one made entirely out of Lego. Although this weapon was sunset in The Taken King, the Iron version of the Gjallarhorn returned a year later with the Rise of Iron expansion. However, it would then disappear from the franchise again with the launch of Destiny 2, and remain gone for quite some time. A few years later, players were shocked to discover that a vendor called The Spider was selling this weapon during the Forsaken expansion. This was really just Bungie trolling us though, since it cost 20 exotic engrams, and due to the game limiting you to only 10 engrams, it was impossible for any player to ever afford it. Gjallarhorn was finally added back to Destiny during the 30th anniversary event in 2021, and although it did return to D2 as quite a powerful weapon, it never came close to matching its ridiculous Destiny 1 legacy. The darkness is not actually evil. Back in the early days of the franchise, many people assumed that the darkness was evil and that it was the enemy. Since the lore and story of the game was extremely nebulous and unexplained, it seemed like an obvious fact that we were the good guys and the darkness represented the bad guys. This belief was further reinforced by Bungie at the time, and I even found this interesting Game Informer interview where Luke Smith is asked point blank about the darkness being evil.
Is the darkness really bad?
Yes.
Even though it originally seemed that the darkness was obviously evil, the events of the past few years have made us realize that the light and darkness are both just powers that make up the Destiny universe, and neither is entirely good or entirely evil. Especially as we began to explore wielding the powers of the darkness, it became more clear that this topic wasn't entirely black and white. You just never quit, do you? Similar to Zavala's monologue about the Cabal on Mars, this was a repetitive voice line that many players heard way too often.
You just never quit, do you?
However, unlike the beloved Cabal on Mars, this one from Hawthorne eventually became a little too obnoxious. In fact, it was so annoying that Bungie actually removed it from the game. The Exo Stranger is a mysterious character first introduced in Vanilla Destiny 1, and she read the infamous line,
"I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain."
Since Vanilla D1 was already being criticized for having a shallow story, people were quick to make fun of this line, with some even calling it the worst dialogue ever heard in a video game. We learned quite a lot more about the Stranger over time, but for a while she was just known as the mysterious Exo with horrible writing. One thing does remain unclear about this character though. She was seemingly talking to someone within the Vanilla D1 campaign, but it was never clear who that person actually was. Your ghost even flies over and asks her who she is speaking with. Many people like this Reddit user are completely baffled about exactly who she was talking to, but it's also possible she was just intentionally written to be extremely vague and she was actually talking to herself. To add even more confusion, there was a pretty common glitch where your Guardian would not even load into this cutscene at all, and this would also delete all of your voice lines from the Ghost and the Guardian. The result is some pretty hilarious shot of the Exostranger literally talking to empty space for 3 minutes and replying to voice lines that were never even spoken. Also, she normally pushes the Ghost away when he asks who she's talking to, but in the glitched version, she still does this pretty funny animation to get the non-existent Ghost out of her face. Dinklebot. This entry refers to Peter Dinklage, who originally voiced the Ghost in Destiny 1 before he was eventually replaced by Nolan North. The Dinklebot voice lines were generally considered to be too monotone and uninteresting, but some people did enjoy his rather deadpan delivery. He did all of the voice lines for vanilla Destiny and the first 2 expansions, but Bungie immediately decided that they were done with Dinklage after the way his performance was received. They scrambled to get all of his voice lines removed from the 2 upcoming expansions, and they brought in Nolan North to do all of the replacements prior to launch. Even though Dinklage wasn't exactly the most popular among the community, he definitely did create some classics that I will include here.
We've woken the hive. It's in the walls.
TWAB/TWID and BWU. These are 3 different acronyms that are essentially the same thing, a weekly update from the developers of Destiny. Back in 2014, it was called the Bungie Weekly Update, and then it was called This Week at Bungie for a while, and now it's called This Week in Destiny. The community at large has seemingly decided to resist the change to TWID, and people are still often calling the weekly update the TWAB. I suppose calling it This Week at Bungie is becoming less and less accurate over time as Bungie expands to other games beyond Destiny, and it wouldn't really make sense to have a general Bungie article solely dedicated to Destiny. Project Tiger was the codename for Destiny when it was still in early development. The name was inspired by early concept art that actually featured a tiger, and there was even a playable race known as Tigerman in early versions of the game. The idea of a space tiger was a centralized driving vision for the early development of the game, and it shaped many of the themes that we ultimately see in the final product. Unfortunately, Tigerman didn't make it into the real game, but there are still tons of references to the Tiger origin. The engine is known as the Tiger engine, and to this day, taking a screenshot on PC will automatically name the file Tiger Release Final. The Crayon Titans. This makes absolutely no sense when you hear it for the first time, but ever since the early days, there has been a Destiny community joke about Titans eating crayons. I suppose all of the classes have memes making fun of the others, but this Titan one is particularly prevalent due to the class often focusing on brute force and meleeing as opposed to the more delicate Hunter and Warlock playstyles. The Crayon Eater is also perhaps a reference to the Marines because this insult is often used on them, and Titans are kind of like the space age version of the Marines. It seems pretty clear that this was the true origin of the joke, but at one point there was a ton of drama where someone claimed that the Crayon Eater term was actually referencing autism and mental disability. As you might imagine, this post caught a ton of attention and massive debate ensued over the next few days. Community manager DMG even replied and said that Bungie would no longer be amplifying this joke due to this new information. I don't claim to have a complete understanding of this topic, but plenty of people more qualified than I came to the tweet and refuted its claims. Mylan here even said that this whole situation actually created a previously non-existent link between autism and the joke, meaning that this whole situation was actually having an extremely negative effect overall. SRL, or Sparrow Racing League. This was a fan favorite D1 event where players would race their Sparrow vehicles all around various tracks while dodging obstacles and enemies. This was originally introduced during the Christmas Dawning event of 2015, and it actually made the holiday event have something more interesting than running errands and baking cookies. It came equipped with custom rewards, a special racing armor set, and some extremely fun and unique maps that were really unlike anything we had seen in Destiny before. This activity did not come forward into Destiny 2 in 2017, and players have been asking for its return ever since. Unfortunately, it seems that bringing back SRL would require quite a bit of development time and resources, and at least so far, Bungie has deemed that it would not be worth bringing it back. This does, however, make me wonder why it was introduced in 2015 as just a fun holiday event if it was originally that resource intensive to create. Scuffed D2 launch and Curse of Osiris. If you ask the average non-Destiny gamer what they know about Destiny 2, they'll probably tell you that the game launched in a really rough state and almost died. And well, they would not be wrong. Especially with Destiny's Curse of Osiris expansion really failing to fix any of the issues from the game, we were literally a few weeks away from the death of the entire franchise. Fun fact, this was actually acknowledged in the lore of the game, with one lore card reading, "The Guardian presence on Mercury and Mars is soft at this time." Luckily though, Cayde and the events of the Forsaken expansion saved the game later that year. Early trailers. Destiny had a truly amazing marketing campaign before its original launch in 2014. There were multiple live-action trailers featuring incredible visuals and songs that I can't play on YouTube, but even if you've never played Destiny, you've certainly seen at least a few of these iconic trailers from the early days. These were advertised like crazy all over the internet and television at the time. Destiny 2 also had some pretty legendary trailers, such as this one where Cayde rallies the troops to take out the big bad guy named Gary, but nobody seems excited until he reminds them that there will be a ton of loot.
Also, there will be a ton of loot! Yeah, right? That's what I thought.
The tricorn. I'm sure you'll recognize this as the official logo of the Destiny franchise, but even today, the symbol itself remains quite a mystery. Nobody really knows what it means, and there is no obvious connection to anything inside of Bungie or the Destiny universe itself. One of the only times we actually see it is on the bottom of this guy's boot in the original opening cinematic, and we can see that he leaves the footprint of the symbol in the sand as he steps on Mars. Another in-game appearance is on the Speaker's robes, perhaps giving us a clue as to how it could relate to the Speaker's role in our story. Many have speculated that perhaps the different parts could be representing the 3 different classes or the 3 main races, and then the piece on the middle could be representing the Traveler. Another theory relates it to the appearance of a wolf looking straight forward, as the game does have quite a few connections to wolves. For example, Lupi in Alpha Lupi means wolves, and there are also many other motifs in Destiny's armor and lore from the Iron Lords. The most outlandish theory is that the logo is based on Master Chief's crotch armor from the Halo series, but this one is of course mostly a joke. The Prison of Elders announcements. From Psylocke the Defiled to the Overmind Minotaur, these voice lines from the Prison of Elders are some of the loudest and most memorable soundbites to ever come out of the Destiny franchise.
Psylocke the Defiled thirsts for your light. Kexis the Betrayed. Dismantle minds, yes, or die.
I hate Destiny, it's my favorite game. This phrase is jokingly used to sum up the sentiment of the overall Destiny community. It seems that many players both love and hate the game at exactly the same time, and others also go through phases of intense love and intense hate. You can easily find reviews that are speaking very negatively, but the person reviewing has thousands or even tens of thousands of hours in-game. This does happen in other gaming communities too, but Destiny players tend to take this to the extreme. Pass the orb. In one particular strike called the Corrupted, there is this ball that players need to pass between one another in order to charge it up. Famously, new players are extremely bad at doing this, and sometimes they're just completely unaware that you can even pass the ball to begin with. This has become a classic meme, and it's something that veteran players are eternally trying to teach the noobs of the Destiny universe. PlayStation exclusives. Bungie previously had this deal with PlayStation that required there to be PlayStation exclusive items in every release of the game, much to the disappointment of Xbox players. For example, literally all of the things you can see on screen right now were only available to people who just happened to be playing on that console. Fortunately, this deal eventually ended, and now every platform is on an even playing field. Weasel, broccoli, chicken, plum, guitar, and beaver. To the uninitiated, the previous list probably just sounds like a bunch of random words strung together. But to an experienced Destiny player, these will easily be recognized as error codes. Each code corresponds to a different reason for disconnection from the game, with some simply removing you to orbit and others booting you all the way out to the main menu. Searching up the error code in question can give you a more detailed explanation of the issue. For instance, error code Beaver appears when your console fails to connect to another player's console via the internet, and therefore is often caused by connection quality issues. Actually difficult exotic quests. Exotic quests have always been pretty involved and required players to go through several steps in order to acquire any given exotic, but nowadays these quests tend to be extremely easy. Anyone can acquire the exotics if they just put in a little bit of time. Back in the day though, this was certainly not the case. For example, the original Thorn quest in 2014 was notoriously difficult since it required players to earn 500 points with void damage in the Crucible. Each final blow would give 5 points, but each death would then subtract 2. So not only did this quest require you to get good at the Crucible, but it also forced you to use Void, something that not all players were accustomed to. To make matters worse, the Night Stalker subclass literally didn't exist yet, so if you just happened to be a hunter, then this quest would be super difficult to complete. Without having a Void subclass to look to, the only option was to use a limited selection of Void weapons to hopefully get the job done. The live events. Over Destiny's history, there have been a number of live events that have been praised by the community overall. Something kind of similar would happen in Destiny 1 when Bungie would tease the upcoming DLCs with an event like the Prowling Wolves, but in Destiny 2, these events became significantly more advanced. The first truly live event took place in 2020, where Guardians could visit the tower and watch the Almighty approach and eventually get destroyed by Rasputin 90 minutes later. Later that year, we were also able to access this awesome new area of the Last City, and there we observed as the Traveler healed itself. Right before the servers went offline for the launch of Beyond Light, we watched as the darkness encroached on the Sol system. These events are super cool, and Bungie has said that they enjoy doing them, but they also said they don't want to overdo them when the story doesn't warrant it. I agree it would get pretty annoying if they manufactured and forced some world-ending event to happen every few months. The 10-year plan. When Bungie signed a 10-year partnership with Activision at the start of Destiny, an ambitious 10-year plan came along with it. The goal was to release a new Destiny game every 2 years with large DLC expansion updates in between. As time went on, it became clear that this plan ultimately wasn't going to work, especially once Destiny 2 got delayed. It's crazy to think that we would actually be getting ready for Destiny 6 right now if things had gone according to plan. Interestingly, at one point a Bungie spokesperson came out and said that they didn't actually view it as a 10-year plan, but more so a 10-year contract with Activision. Challenges in social spaces. There are a variety of hidden challenges in social spaces that can reward you with special outcomes. Like for example, if you move these colored balls to these certain places in the tower, you'll set off celebratory fireworks and a massive traveler ball will appear. Strangely though, you can actually just go to these 3 locations and pull out your ghost instead of moving the balls, and for whatever reason, this tricks the game into completing the objectives. Another challenge is you can participate in the Floor is Lava game by picking up this thing, carrying it over to a pillar of light, and then gaining the ability to defy gravity. You can also engage with this terminal to summon your ship for up-close viewing in the hangar. Although it was removed, you could previously play soccer here and also in the farm with some cool fireworks. The Veil. If you've ever heard someone complaining about the subpar Lightfall expansion, then you've definitely heard about the Veil. People were really upset about the Veil because it was mentioned about 500 times throughout the Lightfall campaign, but it was literally never explained in any way. Even lore masters like Bife said that the Veil was just a mystery, making the campaign feel meaningless. In the following seasons, though, we eventually did learn about the Veil. It turns out the Veil is actually an entity of darkness that is closely connected to the Traveler, and an ancient civilization once used the Veil to learn about the darkness and ultimately merge themselves into the entity we now call the Witness. It all makes sense in retrospect, but the drama caused by the Veil not being explained will go down as one of the biggest shortcomings ever seen in a Destiny expansion. How's your sister? In one of the most famous and unfortunate events to ever happen in Destiny's history, we lost our Hunter Vanguard, Cayde 6. These cutscenes were extremely sad and shocking to players at the time, and also featured quite a memorable line from Cayde. Right before he was taken out, Uldren asked if Cayde had any last words, and then he replied,
How's your sister?
Vostok. This is a PvP map in Destiny 2, but back in D1 it was a location for a campaign mission, and it also became part of a social space called the Iron Temple. This temple was built along the side of a mountain, and if you carefully climbed the mountain on a very specific set of rocks, you could make it to a spot called Fellwinter's Peak. There you would find a small camp with a lit fire, a skeleton, a movable crate, and a dormant Siva cluster. The Speaker's quote. The Speaker was captured and interrogated by Gaul during the Red War campaign, and surprisingly the Speaker had some pretty great comebacks and roasts before his death. In one particularly famous cutscene, he said the following quote, which was then edited into a meme and dubbed the single greatest roast in video game history.
Explain.
Devotion inspires bravery. Bravery inspires sacrifice. Sacrifice leads to death. So, feel free to kill yourself.
From here on out, things are going to step up a little bit as we progress into the surface of the water tier. Although this information is still fairly well known by long-time Destiny players, some newer players may not be familiar with it, and the knowledge is definitely less famous overall. Randall the Vandal and Urzok the Hated. Randall the Vandal and Urzok the Hated were these two enemies from Destiny 1 who had an absurd amount of health for no apparent reason, making them notably more difficult to defeat than everything else. Randall in particular gained a lot of popularity and actually became one of the first ever Destiny memes. People started uploading videos in disbelief of this seemingly random level 8 Vandal surviving even the most insane damage from weapons like Gjallarhorn. Years later, Bungie decided to revive the meme by creating a new perfected version of Randall within the Wrath of the Machine raid. He was very rare though and almost never spawned in, so only a few teams have ever had the distinct pleasure of facing him within the raid. Within Destiny 2, Bungie has also hidden several more Easter eggs, including a Nightmare Vandal on the Moon, a renewed Vandal on the Cosmodrome and EDZ, and an unkillable Vandal boss within the Grasp of Avarice dungeon. More recently, Vandal returned once again within the quest to find the dog Archie. This version of Randall was also immortal, and he seemingly disappears if you manage to get him below 10% health. The death of the player. During Season 9, there was a special event called the Corridors of Time, in which players had to travel through time and unravel a bunch of extremely complicated puzzles. After this community event was solved though, we found a grave along with a sword and a ghost. Upon interacting with it, we hear a message from Sate 14, who explains that this is actually our grave. Ultimately, we find out that somehow, sometime in the future, we will die and be laid to rest here alongside this sword and part of the Bastion fusion rifle, which was apparently one of our favorite weapons. This sword was a mystery for years, but now in the final shape, we've come full circle. This is none other than Ergo Sum, the first ever special ammo sword in Destiny. There is also a lot of mystery surrounding this whole topic because time travel is complicated and the story is unclear, so who knows what will ultimately happen to our Guardian in the distant future. Edge Transit. During the beginning of the Forsaken expansion, there was a glitch where prime engrams seemed to always turn into a rather mediocre grenade launcher called Edge Transit. Something must have been seriously wrong with the weighting of the weapon pool, because within just a few days, players started to get so overwhelmed with Edge Transits that it became a meme. I love this meme in particular, showing the Edge Transit in literally every slot within the game, because honestly that is how it felt. Years later, Bungie would bring back the Edge Transit during the event called Into the Light. Ironically, the Edge Transit was actually extremely good, and especially if you got certain rolls on the shiny version of the renewed grenade launcher, it actually became one of the best weapons in the game. Unplugging the Ethernet cord. In perhaps the most iconic D1 glitch of all time, the raid boss Crota could be defeated by having a certain player unplug their console from the internet at a specific point during the fight. This would cause Crota to just kneel on the ground forever, letting players secure the easiest raid clear of their lives. There was certainly some debate about the legitimacy of raid completions at the time, since many considered this to be cheating or just a cheap way of clearing the boss. Ultimately, it was patched of course, but it remains a fun memory and a pretty notable entry in the Destiny community lore. Halo 3 ODST poster. Before they released Destiny to the public, Bungie teased the game within their previous game, Halo 3 ODST. There was this poster with the words Destiny awaits, an image of Earth, and a small circle that looks suspiciously like the Traveler. The logo beneath it also somewhat resembles an upside-down version of Destiny's Tricorn logo. This completely flew over everyone's heads at the time, but after initial news started to break about the development of Destiny IP, people started making the connection to this sneaky little poster. AFK leveling. For a really long time, players have been searching out ways to level or gain other forms of loot or currencies overnight while they are sleeping and AFK. Whether it's for farming the elimination counter on your weapon or to get the max level in a season, there have been many times in Destiny's history where AFK leveling has been very lucrative. Perhaps the most famous instance was called AFK forge farming, where players would intentionally equip extremely low power items in order to infinitely queue into the activities and receive endless loot and engrams. A lot of people got super rich by doing this, and it remains one of the most hilarious farms in Destiny history. 2402. Whenever a new raid is released into Destiny, there is always a massive race to see which team can beat it first. Unfortunately, content creator Dado and his team managed to clear the raid in 24 hours and 2 minutes, and this event became pretty famous in the Destiny community.
2 minutes late. Literally 2 minutes.
Since day 1 and the associated glory only counts for the first 24 hours, they just barely missed the mark. Some people created a petition saying that the team should be granted the coveted Day 1 emblem because they only missed the window by 2 minutes, but ultimately Bungie decided not to, and the community has since embraced the 2402 meme. EXO numbers. The numbers in an EXO's name refer to the number of times they have undergone a memory wiping reboot. For example, you might be familiar with characters like Cade 6 or Banshee 44. I feel like 44 is quite a lot already, but there is an EXO named Echo 2625. And yes, they have been rebooted 2625 times and currently hold the record for the most reboots of any EXO in history. Eliksni versus Fallen. This refers to one of the main races in the Destiny universe. They are called the Eliksni, and that is the name that they use themselves, but humanity and the Vanguard have long referred to them as the Fallen. This is because the Eliksni once flourished under the Traveler's influence, but their civilization became significantly degraded after the Traveler abandoned them. As Varix explained, their people now consider the term Fallen to be offensive and potentially even similar to a slur.
It may seem that my people have fallen, but it is not true. The word insults us.
This information did not become known in the community for a while though, and many players still simply refer to them as the Fallen. The ball on the moon. We previously spoke about moving the balls in the tower to summon the fireworks, but there is also another one of these balls on the moon. This one is interesting because it doesn't appear unless you traverse these hidden platforms and pay glimmer into this terminal off in the distance. This seems to be very intentionally designed, but to this day, nobody has found a purpose for the ball. It doesn't seem to activate any special minigames by moving it, and it doesn't have any known purpose that anyone can figure out. Lastly, a fun fact about these balls is that during the Red War, you could actually find the remains of a deflated purple ball, which was a nod to its existence within the original Destiny 1 tower. Additional emote actions. Some emotes have additional actions that can be activated by pressing the emote button again. Like for example, this emote will do this ending action when you press the button a second time. Prometheus and Lord of Wolves emblems. These two emblems are used to commemorate brief periods of absolute insanity within Destiny's PvP. For a time, Prometheus' lens was absolutely ruining the Crucible and deleting everyone, and Lord of Wolves also had nearly infinite ammo and defeated people from absurdly far away. Prometheus in particular was absolutely crazy, and it basically just made every other weapon completely irrelevant for about 1 week. The community often refers to this as laser tag weekend because there was actually nothing happening other than solar laser spam in every direction. The laser tag weekend has a pretty funny additional story associated with it, because after players realized that the weapon was broken, they thought that certainly Xur wouldn't sell the weapon over the weekend. One Reddit user was particularly convinced of this, saying that he would shave off his hair and glue it to his face as a beard if Xur sold the weapon. Millions of people saw this post, and it seems that someone at Bungie might have come across it as well, because when the time came, they posted, "Did you make a bet that we wouldn't let Xur sell Prometheus lens? It's available in the EDZ. Your move." At that point, everyone lost their minds, and every single Crucible game completely devolved into an absurd laser tag skirmish. Telesto. Telesto is an exotic fusion rifle that is known for causing problems. For some reason that the average gamer cannot begin to comprehend, the mechanics of this weapon were extremely prone to causing bugs and glitches, and there have probably been like 100 different individual instances of Telesto breaking the game. There is literally an entire website dedicated to documenting every time Telesto broke something. From giving orbs of power to literally crashing the game, the list here is pretty endless. One of the funniest was perhaps when the gunsmith was trying to fix Telesto, but when you interacted with the gunsmith, this would crash your game. In 2022, Bungie embraced the joke and made the Telesto seem to overtake the game, posting all kinds of strange messages on the screen and making the weapon itself behave very strangely. In fact, it was acting so strangely that the community began to form conspiracy theories about how the Telesto bolts rose up into the sky and formed constellations that represented a secret message. To be fair, Bungie has pulled a lot of strange things like this in the past, so it wasn't so unreasonable to assume. It was a pretty hilarious event to witness, and it was entertaining to watch the seemingly sentient projectiles fly up into the sky. Telesto also posted on all of the official Destiny social media accounts during this time, and many people assumed it was an elaborate puzzle that needed solving. However, it was later revealed that this whole thing was just a joke, much to the dismay of people who spent multiple days looking for non-existent clues and constellations. We were given this emblem to commemorate the reign of Telesto, but sadly nothing really noteworthy happened afterward. 12-player raids. Destiny raids have always involved 6 players, but for a time there was a bug that allowed fireteams to hold up to 12 players in raids. This led to some of the most crazy boss melts of all time and a whole bunch of fun challenges invented by the community. There were some crazy videos of everyone using the same weapon, or just people deleting raid bosses with the ridiculous power of all 12 guardians synced up together. Like, take a look at this boss's health bar as it tries to survive the combined power of all 12 players casting Celestial Nighthawk Golden Gun. There were also other ways to get 12 players into things like Nightfalls, which are only meant to have 3 people, making the power dynamic even more hilarious. An interesting side effect of this glitch is that it proved that 12-player activities were indeed possible. Bungie informed us that due to some technical limitations, they couldn't just add 12-player things into the game immediately, but it did open up the expectation of future 12-player activities in the franchise. Sparrow Horns. You might know that your sparrow will beep when going in reverse, but back in Destiny 1, sparrows had actual horns that you could set off whenever you wanted. It would get highly annoying in sparrow races when people would just start spamming their horns non-stop, and I even found this amazing clip of a so-called sparrow horn battle taking place on Mars. Overall though, nobody really knows why sparrow horns were not brought forward into Destiny 2. I guess it was consistent with a larger trend where many things were either dumbed down or just removed when Destiny 2 started. For example, things like stats, weapon rolls, PvP, and many other features were just extremely bare bones, leaving many veteran players unhappy with the initial launch of the game. Anyway, to close up the topic about sparrow horns, here are some of my favorites from back in Destiny 1. The Revelry was a seasonal event kind of like the Halloween and Christmas ones. The reason why this isn't at the tip of the iceberg is because this event only happened once, and if you didn't happen to play during these 2 weeks in 2019, you probably don't even know about this event. During the Revelry, the tower was filled up with flowers, since this was apparently a celebration of life in the Destiny universe. There was also this tonic that massively changed ability cooldowns in the game, making PvP essentially unplayable. Players were just spamming all of their abilities like throwing infinite grenades, and the only person who was happy about this was probably Shaxx. There was also just a reskinned Infinite Forest with flowers added in, which people immediately criticized for being stale and boring, and perhaps this is why the event never returned in future years of Destiny. I kind of liked the idea of this event, and perhaps it will return someday, but for now it seems to be on hiatus and is largely replaced by Guardian games. Free emblem codes. There is a collection of emblems from various events over the years that anyone can have, and honestly they're all way better than the default emblems you get as a new player. I'll show them on screen here, and if you're missing any of them, you can easily go pick them up. Just go over to bungie.net/redeem and type them in to immediately unlock them in-game. Skating tech. This entry refers to the various different types of movement tech in this game that can be used to travel extremely fast. In the past, we had Titan skating, but over the years there have been so many different types of cool techniques using various swords and abilities. There are a ton of different ways to skate, and it's surprisingly not that difficult to do if you have someone teach you correctly. It can be really fun to just zoom forward and travel way faster than sprinting or even vehicles. The lawsuits. Bungie has been involved in a lot of very notable lawsuits that were covered extensively in the news, which is why this is so high up on the iceberg. For example, they've sued multiple cheat websites for tens of millions of dollars, they've sued players for harassing their staff, and one time they famously sued a YouTuber for $7.6 million after he filed 96 illegal copyright takedown notices on the Destiny community. We covered all of these in a video going over the history of Destiny controversies, which was pretty crazy, but suffice it to say there has been a lot of illegal stuff going on in the past few years. Excuse me. This refers to an amazing meme where the community wrote custom dialogue for Zavala. This was written for the time when the Cabal Empress Keitel proposed an alliance, and then she ordered Zavala to bow. In the actual game, Zavala simply replied with no, but in this community-written version, he begins with "excuse me," and then goes on an epic 60-second, expletive-filled rant about how the Cabal have been getting annihilated by Guardians for the last 9 years. Lance Reddick, the late voice actor of Commander Zavala, read out this entire dialogue, and then various members of the community put it into a new version of the cutscene to make it seem realistic. It was absolutely hilarious and extremely popular in the community, with one of these recreations of the cutscene garnering nearly 1.7 million views. The Oryx debate. Ever since the raid was first introduced in 2015, the community has been engaged in a heated debate about the location of Oryx, the raid boss. Some people argue he's in the front of the room like a teacher in a classroom, while others argue he's actually in the back of the room because he is far away from the entrance. There have been countless metaphors and concepts presented on both sides, and it seems the community will never end this pointless and hilarious debate. The craftening. This refers to arguably the greatest and most influential glitch in Destiny's history. In late 2023, certain players started to realize that you could craft weapons with perks that absolutely were not meant to be craftable on those weapons. You would basically be blending two different types of weapons together in a way that was absolutely game-breaking. For example, you could craft an auto rifle that fired like a shotgun, making it unleash thousands of shells per minute and absolutely delete anything in the game. You could also just make your auto rifle unleash endless grenades and basically every other absurd combination you could possibly dream up. This glitch actually flew under the radar for a while, with only a few select players knowing of its existence. But right in time for a trials weekend in September, the word began to spread on how to take advantage of this ridiculous cheese. Especially after Bungie clarified that nobody would be banned for exploiting this, hundreds of thousands of players rushed to create the most overpowered weapons in the history of the game. Reissues and reskins. It's pretty common for video games to create reskins and similar looking items to save on development costs, and Destiny is no exception. Sometimes the reskins are done tastefully and there's some level of innovation, but other times not so much. Like, how many times have we seen this exact fusion rifle? Perhaps the most meme-worthy example, though, is the sheer number of reissues we've seen of the hung jury scout rifle. There have been 7 iterations of this weapon, and people have been making quite a few posts like, what kind of gamer are you? The prehistoric gamer, the retro gamer, or the old school gamer? Refer a friend. During the Taken King and Forsaken eras, Destiny launched 2 different Refer a Friend programs where existing players could recruit their friends to play the game and have both of them earn some special rewards. Unlike the traditional Refer a Friend programs in other games though, the Destiny program basically had a quest that you would need to progress together as a fire team. In Destiny 1, the quest would award 2 legendary emotes, a shader, sword, emblem, and sparrow. In Destiny 2, the reward was Borealis, an exclusive Borealis ornament, and an emblem, ship, and sparrow. Of course, we don't exactly have the analytics of the performance of these programs, but overall I'd say that they were a really excellent idea. Destiny has always been difficult to approach when you're a total beginner, so having a friend who is incentivized to stick by your side and guide you through the quest sounds amazing. I also find it interesting that the 2 times we had these special programs also happened to be during the 2 best expansions of all time, and then the programs were simply discontinued after the expansions. It would probably be very beneficial to bring back some version of the Refer a Friend quest to the modern game, especially now that the Destiny universe has been around for so long and has grown so complex. In my recent video where I watched my friend try Destiny 2 for the first time, I got some first-hand experience of watching what it's really like to be a total beginner in this game. Based on this experience, I'd say that a Refer a Friend program could do wonders for getting new players into the game and making their experience better by providing them with a built-in friend and extra rewards. The Master Ives Mystery. Back in Destiny 1, Master Ives was the Cryptarch who would serve Guardians at the Reef. However, sometime during the events of Forsaken, he was mysteriously murdered, and we had to investigate this during the following Festival of the Lost. Based on something that appeared to be a lost journal page of Master Ives, we concluded that the Fallen were responsible, and we hunted down and eliminated Kiklas, a Fallen captain. For the conclusion of this quest, we returned to Amanda Holiday, who gave us Master Ives' final engram, which decrypted into the Thunderlord exotic. While giving us this final engram though, Amanda seemed uncertain. She said that the Fallen had no apparent motive for murdering Ives, and she stated that this was probably part of a larger story of some kind. We never really got an explanation in the lore that might suggest a deeper conspiracy here, but some players do have a bit of a strange theory. Master Ives was voiced by the same actor who voices Devrim Kay, so Bungie might have simply eliminated Ives to avoid having 2 characters that sounded almost exactly the same. They might have also just seen Ives as expendable since he was only in the D1 Reef and not in D2. Hilarious weapon logic. If you ever critically examine a Destiny weapon and ask yourself how it would work in real life, you might notice some logical flaws that would completely ruin functionality. Take a look at this scout rifle, where a massive hole is right in the middle of where the magazine goes, making it completely impossible for the rounds to actually move up unless they go in some absurd path like you can see in this animation. I'm sure this can all be explained away by the words space magic, but sometimes it's kind of funny to take a closer look at the unique physics of the Destiny universe. The Screeb Raid Boss. The Scorn have a particularly annoying type called the Screeb, and these creatures will sprint directly towards you at an alarming pace before exploding. The Screebs are generally quite small, but one day someone at Bungie decided that they should instead scale the Screeb up by 500%, and then this absolutely terrifying Screeb Raid Boss was born. It only exists in this strange testing area created by Bungie, but we can only imagine the size of the explosion that it would create in-game. Lootapalooza. In vanilla Destiny 2, there was a very strange event known as Lootapalooza. This all started out when players would have a small chance of getting a key if they had pledged allegiance to one of the factions and then they defeated Callus. At first, this was a total mystery. What could this strange key possibly be used for? A while later, one player discovered that the key could be used in the tower at various different monitors, and this would essentially trigger a massive public event within the social space for all players who were there with you. It would read, Cade 6 has dropped treasure chests in the tower, have at 'em. You then had a few minutes to loot the chests, but if you climbed all the way up into the rafters of the hangar, you could loot this specific chest which contained a dance party key. This could be used to open another chest, start the music, and officially begin the dance party. Everyone in the tower would then come over to join the dance party and loot this chest, and although it could give pretty ordinary loot, it also did have a chance to reward legendaries and even exotics. We convert everything into a weapon. It has kind of become a meme at this point because it seems that wherever we go, we find stuff and then turn it into the next exotic weapon in our arsenal. For example, the bug inside Xenophage used to be a guardian, and at least some part of Zol's essence has been preserved within Whisper of the Worm. Colonel. There was once an ordinary looking chicken at the farm, but then Cade took a liking to her and named her Colonel. She actually became a valuable member of his team, distracting the Cabal for just long enough for Cade to drop in from above and take them out. Following Cade's death, Colonel was relocated to the tower to fill Cade's spot, and she looked very lonely and forgotten for some time. It seems that Bungie also forgot about her because she got completely buried in the snow that was added during the Dawning event, and you could only see her by clearing out all the snow in the area. Saint 14 keeps a bunch of pigeons, and it seems he also likes Colonel as he has now given her the title of Pigeon Lord. The original material farms. Back in the early days of D1, there was this massive emphasis on obtaining and then consuming planetary materials to upgrade weapons and armor. It was rather expensive to upgrade all of your armor and unlock all of their perks. For this reason, many players have memories of spending quite a few hours learning the farming routes on various worlds for harvesting the materials and profiting as much as possible. Some liked this grind, but others also thought it was incredibly boring and repetitive. Rewind Wounds. The perk Rewind Rounds is a pretty bad tongue twister and it is hard to say out loud, so most people just end up calling it Rewind Wounds instead, whether by accident or on purpose. Faction Rallies. Destiny 1 originally introduced the concept of factions, where players would pledge their allegiance to one of the three factions and then earn loot and reputation over time. When factions were brought into Destiny 2 though, they took a bit of a different approach. There were now these events called faction rallies where each of the factions would compete against one another. The objective was to collect as many faction tokens as possible throughout the duration of the event in order to acquire gear and contribute to your faction's success. Each faction presented an official weapon as a reward for the rally, but only the winning faction would actually offer that weapon up for sale. It was actually kind of a big deal because the community would essentially vote for which weapon they wanted, and then it would have an impact on the meta in the future. Faction rallies were eventually removed from the game, and the factions are not part of gameplay anymore, but maybe someday they will return with a renewed purpose in the future. The disappearance of weapon scopes. A huge percentage of weapons in Destiny used to come equipped with either sights or scopes that would be used to customize the optics of the weapon and substantially change the stats. Over the years though, this became less and less common, with barrel options taking the place of the optics. This was largely because the players would tend to gravitate towards one scope, making the others rather pointless and a waste of development resources. The airborne effectiveness drama. In 2022, Bungie introduced a brand new system called Airborne Effectiveness that would determine how accurate you would be in the air. The system was notorious for its poor implementation, and when it was first introduced, airborne combat of any kind basically became impossible unless you heavily invested all of your resources from build crafting. The airborne stat also just didn't appear at all within the game, so that made it extra annoying, and casual players were especially confused. Fast forward a few years, and the issues from this system have been mostly resolved. Players can now jump and hit their shots like they could originally, the stat appears in the game, and you can improve the stat through build crafting if you want to. Dancing on your Sparrow. This one refers to the bug that let you dance or use whatever emote you wanted on top of your Sparrow while driving it like normal. Unfortunately, this was patched, but it was pretty hilarious seeing some guy dancing on top of his vehicle while also flying past you at like 100 miles an hour. The Taken King edition of the PS4. Destiny collaborated with PlayStation to celebrate the launch of the Taken King expansion, creating an exclusive Destiny-branded white version of the PS4. This also came with a copy of the Taken King expansion, and this deal helped some Destiny players make the leap from the older PS3, which could still run Destiny at the time. The D1 public event website. In modern Destiny 2, the map of every destination is quite helpful and shows us information like the arrival of public events. However, in Destiny 1, this was somehow not a thing. In fact, the only way to find out about public events was to visit an actual website that would tell you when and where they would appear. And in retrospect, that is absolutely ridiculous. It relied completely on player reports to log and display public events, and then it would relay this information to everyone else to help them out. Pushing Atheon. In the beginning of Destiny 1, Bungie made the mistake of letting players and their abilities directly influence the position of the final boss in the Vault of Glass raid. Players discovered that if they simply threw their grenades right next to the boss, they could eventually force him to just step right off the edge, netting everybody some extremely free loot. Infinite Supers. There have been a few times in Destiny history where certain exploits would give the player base completely unlimited super abilities. For example, you could basically just mash your controller in Destiny 1 to throw infinite hammers. Destiny 2 at one point had infinite Nova Bombs, the beta had infinite Arc Striders, and another time you could have infinite Dawnblades by simply swapping your armor. These were obviously all incredibly broken and got patched out of the game, but players who experienced these things firsthand will probably remember the chaos that followed. Pre-order exclusives. If you managed to pre-order a physical copy of Destiny 1 during 2014, specifically through GameStop, you'd get access to the exclusive Sparrow S10V. They made a whole video dedicated to it, claiming it would, quote, boost your adventure with this upgraded red Sparrow. It also talked about better acceleration, higher top speed, and extra durability, but as it turns out, that could kind of be earned through gameplay anyways, and this Sparrow was only exclusive for a short period of time. GameStop did another promotion for the pre-order of Destiny 2 in 2017, and this one was arguably more enticing. They offered a tiny collectible Cayde 6 figurine, which many players instantly fell in love with. We're about to move onto the shallow waters tier. Since we're now moving below the surface of the water, the iceberg will start to become a lot more obscure. If you're a dedicated Destiny player, you might still be familiar with these, but I'm certain that the deepest levels will truly put your knowledge to the test. We've still got a long way down to go. The helmet stayed on. This entry refers to Marasov seemingly using this wall of wishes to summon Lord Shaxx for a booty call. The end of the lore entry reads, Mara sat and listened. They stayed for a long time. The helmet stayed on. This was followed by a ton of speculation that this was implying the helmet stayed on while everything else was off. However, later on, people started to realize that yet another lore entry kind of contradicted this theory. It seemed that Mara might have been more interested in hearing about another Destiny character named Sir Ido instead of doing anything with Shaxx. To this day though, this particular bit of Destiny lore has remained a meme among the community, especially because Shaxx literally never takes off his helmet in-game. His helmet always staying on has also led to some absolutely crazy theories, like people guessing he is William Shakespeare resurrected due to him also knowing some of Shakespeare's work by heart according to the lore. In fact, he is able to recite all 5 acts of The Tempest from memory, which is over 16,000 words. This theory is unfounded overall, but there has been some extensive speculation, even going as detailed as saying that the worn tombstone of Shakespeare was only partially readable, which is why he's now called Shax instead of Shakespeare. I think I'm just going to refer to him as Lord Shakespeare from now on. 2011 pre-alpha builds. This is some rare footage of a very early version of Destiny, assumed to be sometime during 2011. We can see these early versions of enemies, grenades, the user interface, jumping, and a few generic-looking weapons. The animations all look very basic, and it kind of looks like the Roblox version of Destiny that I put in my other video talking about all of the Destiny clones that are out there. One of the interesting iterations of the game featured a very minimalist display where the icons were super tiny and disappeared into the bottom left, while other versions had the icons actually attached to your weapon, which looks extremely strange. Overall, it's clear that the design went through a ton of different versions, and it's fascinating to get a peek behind the curtain to see a little bit of what the game looked like way back in the day. Moons Haunted. This one refers to an extremely viral meme text story where astronauts return from the moon to arm themselves with pistols because the moon is apparently haunted. Shortly after this meme circulated on the internet, the Destiny expansion Shadowkeep was revealed, in which the moon literally becomes haunted. Of course, somebody made a Destiny-themed version of this meme where a Guardian is having the same conversation except with Ikora instead of NASA. Bungie even acknowledged the meme by making a short trailer and also referencing it in the game with a bounty called "Which Moon is Haunted?" The phrase "Moon's Haunted" became another one of those inside jokes, and only Destiny players who were around during Shadowkeep will truly understand its meaning. Zavala has hair. This entry is referencing a strange limited edition D1 art book that shows a picture of Zavala, but instead of being bald like usual, he has a pretty significant amount of hair. This is particularly strange when you consider that there is a cinematic trailer of Zavala being revived for the first time, at which time he is also bald, so I guess we don't really know how or if he ever did have hair. XP throttling. This one caused a ton of drama back in vanilla Destiny 2. Back then, there were two ways to acquire Eververse engrams: by buying them with real money or by earning them with in-game experience. A huge controversy began when players realized that Bungie was secretly limiting and throttling experience gains, making it much harder to earn the free Eververse engrams. The more you played, the less experience you would actually earn. Players were understandably quite upset about this because it felt like a sneaky way of encouraging more microtransactions, and it also punished players who were dedicated and playing a lot of the game. Within a few hours of players finding this out, Bungie immediately disabled the XP throttling system, stating that they were, quote, not happy with the results. Players were of course happy to see the issue getting resolved, but they also felt it was a bit odd that the issue was kept hidden and then instantly patched as soon as it was discovered and people started complaining. Fractaline's stock market. Right before the launch of Season of the Worthy in Destiny 2, there was a limited time event where players needed to spend massive amounts of a currency called Fractaline. Tons of investing memes began to circulate the community because the more you invested in this currency, the more you would get as a return in future weeks. It was essentially like the real stock market, except you could never lose your money, so basically all of the downsides of real investing were removed. There was a whole movement to spread the word about the stock market so that players could invest and spend enough to complete the event. The Tire Game. Right next to the main landing zone on the moon, there is this strange game where you roll tires down these pipes and into some moon craters. You have to pay a glimmer price to begin the game, and then a strange tire will just kind of roll out from this machine. It's basically like Destiny's version of bowling, except the skill involved in bowling is completely removed. It's simply too difficult to control the tires in any meaningful way, so you kind of just have to do your best and hope for a lucky bounce. The goal is supposed to be to get all of the tires into a single hole, but it's very buggy and often thinks that the tires are in different places than they actually are. If you do happen to get a perfect score though, you get a triumph and it plays a funny sound, and then it announces to the entire moon that you have just won the tire game. You should definitely go try it out if you never have, because it's pretty fun, but like I said, it's very inconsistent and you shouldn't expect to master it on your first few attempts. Guided games. Back when Destiny 2 was first revealed to the public, Bungie seems to be very excited about this new feature called Guided Games. It was hyped up by this very big presentation about how it was supposed to be the ultimate solution for the loneliness problem that so many players faced back in D1. It was basically like an LFG system, except clans would guide individuals through various activities. Bungie even designed these custom emblems to reward people for participating in the new guided games ecosystem. It seemed like a cool concept, but in practice, it was unfortunately an absolute failure. Very few players actually used the system, resulting in hilariously long wait times, language barriers, and frequent connection issues. It strangely remained in the game despite all of these issues though, and Bungie just slapped the word beta on it and assumed that we would all forget about it. We had to wait over 6 years for an actual LFG system to be finally added to the game in late 2023. Apparently, it was quite a technical feat to implement this, but I'm very glad it was done because it is such an essential system, especially when you're new to the game. If you're also looking to meet other players, feel free to join my Discord server where we just recently passed 30,000 members. Callus makes wine out of planets. The Leviathan is a massive Cabal spaceship with the function of grinding up entire planets and turning them into wine for Emperor Callus. The so-called royal wine was apparently able to provide psionic powers, and that's why Callus was so obsessed with it. The royal wine itself is said to be a thick, purple, glistening liquid that is created from the soil of planets that are consumed by the Leviathan. Callus became so addicted to this wine that he actually hooked himself up to a machine that would pump it directly into his body. The toaster. This one refers to a real-life toaster that Bungie officially sold on their website for $85. To make use of their favorite number 7, Bungie announced this toaster after a charity stream raised $777,777. The toaster itself is a reference to the exotic weapon Jotun, since it actually looks like a fireball-throwing toaster in the game. Some players, though, were rather outraged because they wanted to see a toaster that actually looked like Jotun instead of just this ordinary one. Unfortunately, it seems that that probably would have just been far too expensive to produce. Dan here actually replied to the Bungie store account to make fun of the basic design, showing that he found the same exact toaster for a mere $25 instead of Bungie's $85. The toaster isn't completely ordinary though, because it does have the special ability to print the Destiny logo onto your toast, and 10% of the profits from it were donated to charity. Your purchase also came with the in-game emblem called Burnt Edges. Stasis is not ice. Stasis looks and sounds like it should be made of ice, but according to Bungie, it is far from being actual frozen water. You can't exactly just apply some fire to it and watch it melt back into a liquid. Although it does have some properties relating to coldness, stasis is like an elemental manifestation of darkness, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is. It is known that it is extremely powerful though, and can literally freeze time and space. Transmog gives you stats. So believe it or not, there is actually a way to get bonus stats on your character just by using transmog. Most people assume that transmog is just a cosmetic thing, but it actually can give you bonus resilience on your character. If you transmog this specific chest piece, it will give you +1 resilience for no apparent reason. A single point of resilience might not seem like a big deal, but it could absolutely make or break your stat distribution if you happen to be just 1 point away of the next tier. So next time you have a build with a resilience stat ending in 9, remember this iceberg video. The $320 million cornfield. During Season of Plunder, there was a community event where we needed to donate captain's coins and other currencies to rebuild the Elixni Quarter. We needed to donate about $320 million worth of currency. In typical Destiny community fashion, we immediately discovered a bug that would brute force this event within just 1 day. We were all expecting to get a grand finale upon completion, but it turned out that we basically just paid for a couple new wooden benches and a cornfield. Due to the insane $320 million investment, the Destiny community felt a bit let down by this anticlimactic ending, and this led to a lot of memes about this being the most expensive cornfield of all time. Engrams decrypting into lower rarities. In the early days of Destiny 1, engrams actually had a very high chance of decrypting into lower rarities than the engram was, much to the chagrin of literally every Destiny player ever. There was nothing more frustrating than visiting the Cryptarch to turn in a shiny new engram that you just got, and then have him decrypt it into utter trash that you could not use. Even exotics were just decrypting into garbage items, and this artificial rarity inflation remains one of the most universally disliked systems in Destiny history. On the bright side though, there was also an unbelievably slim chance of getting your blue engram to decrypt into an exotic, leading to some of the most surprising and epic moments players have ever experienced. Vault flying. There was a way to spam a certain combination of buttons in order to fly across the Destiny 1 tower and end up on top of these tall vertical vaults. You had to begin by climbing up these boxes and doing some relatively precise jumping, but once you got up to this part, you could literally just start flying. This was somewhat of a secret for a while, and it was pretty funny because new players would just look at you in awe and wonder how you managed to get all the way on top of the vaults. Certain bullets can go through walls. Armor-piercing rounds cause bullets to overpenetrate their targets in Destiny 2, but in Destiny 1, this also caused them to overpenetrate actual obstacles and some very solid-looking walls. Due to special ammo being super plentiful in the early days, it was a legitimate strategy to just spam your sniper into the wall and eventually get random lucky eliminations. These days, people complain about getting hit through walls due to lag, but in Destiny 1, it could actually happen as an intended mechanic. Level ? Knights. Back in the D1 alpha, players discovered these nearly unkillable hallowed knights that were level ? At the time, they were by far the hardest enemies in existence, and they became the unofficial final boss of the alpha. They would straight up one-shot everyone, and they had an absurd amount of health, leading to a lot of confused players uploading gameplay of their encounters. They might seem kind of ordinary in retrospect, but at the time, these nearly invincible knights were considered the pinnacle of challenge in the Destiny alpha. Forever 29. In vanilla D1, it was extremely common to get stuck with your guardian at level 29. Since the only way to get high-level gear was to complete the raid, you had to be extremely lucky to get all of your armor slots to the maximum light level. To make things even more challenging, the normal version of the raid only dropped level 28, so you actually had to complete the hard mode version if you wanted to reach the elusive level 30. With all of the knowledge we have today, the hard mode raid probably wouldn't be too difficult, but when the game was new and nobody was very good, the average player really struggled in hard mode. Even if you did manage to beat it, you had a limited number of drops per week, and you had to get every single weapon and armor piece in order to actually hit the max rank of 30. For this reason, you'd find many situations where players would be missing just 1 or 2 level 30 pieces, and would therefore be stuck at level 29 due to simple bad luck. And therefore, the hashtag Forever29 remains somewhat of an inside joke for veteran D1 players. Ghost bullets. This is a term referring to bullets that seemingly vanish into thin air and do not impact your target. Back in D1, this was much more of an issue, with a huge percentage of bullets seemingly disappearing and missing when they should have obviously counted as a headshot. Some people assumed that this awful feature was a glitch, but no, it was actually an intended mechanic. Weapons were intentionally just super inaccurate. After this information was discovered, people became even more outraged, and it eventually got addressed, so it's not really much of an issue nowadays. Welp, there goes Flawless. If you complete a raid or dungeon without anyone dying, you unlock a special Flawless achievement. Even though the overwhelming majority of fire teams are not attempting to get a flawless run, it has become a requirement to say, "Welp, there goes Flawless" whenever your fire team experiences their first death in the activity. Drifter versus Vanguard. A few years ago, there was a pretty dramatic quest where players were forced to either pledge allegiance to Drifter or the Vanguard. This was instantly intriguing and sent the community into a frenzy discussing which side they were choosing and why. It did feel pretty significant because it was clear that there was no going back. Once you picked a side, you were committed forever. There was even this big highlighted text that read, "This decision has consequences." This made everyone believe that there would be further implications down the road, leading to perhaps different narratives depending on which side you picked. Many people even theorized that this could be a pivotal moment for the future of the game's story and the identity of your guardian. Unfortunately though, this quest led to absolutely nothing other than getting a little reputation for whichever side you chose. Considering that the quest has been fully removed from the game since the incident, it's safe to say that nothing will ever come in the future either. I assume that there was something greater in the works related to this quest, but it seems that Bungie decided to take a different path and they have completely abandoned this allegiance idea. Trading items with other players. I don't know about you, but I've always wished that I could trade my loot with a friend. Like maybe they have a great roll on a weapon that they don't really use, but you really want it. Well, believe it or not, in-game trading was actually a thing in a very early version of Destiny 1. As we can see in this pre-alpha footage of the game, there is actually an option to trade with this other player standing in the tower. It's entirely possible that this was just a menu feature and that trading didn't actually exist within that version of the game, but it's still crazy that this was at least considered at some point. Many other MMOs do have economies and currencies that can be traded freely with other players, so perhaps this is an area that will someday be opened up to the Destiny world. Economies like this can open up a whole bunch of depth to the game and create new opportunities for players, so maybe this will be considered in the future. Negative silver balance. It might sound ridiculous, but it is actually possible to go into debt and have negative silver in Destiny 2. This is an in-game currency that can be bought with real money, so it kind of makes no sense that you could have spent a negative amount of real-life money in the game. This has indeed happened a few times over the years due to platform and server glitches related to the in-game store, but these issues were mostly corrected and the silver balances were restored to usual. EV30 Tumbler. This was the first ever Sparrow with the ability to perform tricks. In December 2014, this was just such a novel concept that the player base quickly became obsessed with the new Sparrow and finding new ways to do crazy tricks. Nowadays, this is just something that people take for granted, and the skimmer vehicles even have tricks and cool animations baked into their basic functionality. The 0.04% buff. In November 2015, Bungie unveiled some new patch notes for Destiny 1, and everyone was praising them. The upcoming patch was set to buff auto rifles and bring them back into the meta, slightly nerf rapid-fire pulse rifles, address the overpowered Sunbreaker subclass, and overall it was supposed to fix quite a few issues with the game. However, when the patch got implemented into the game the following month, Bungie announced that they had actually made an error. They said that the patch notes were accidentally super inaccurate. Players were really looking forward to the changes that were originally presented, so they were pretty upset to find that the actual changes were not even remotely close to the patch notes from the previous month. One change in particular really stood out. Instead of getting a 4% buff, rapid-fire auto rifles were instead getting a 0.04% buff. To put that into perspective, that's only an extra 4 damage every time you deal 10,000 damage, so players were completely baffled by this change. Datto was extremely confused as to how things could be off by 10x to 100x. A Bungie employee followed up with, "It was an extremely unfortunate typo, but the change was intentional." The overall community was just outraged by the downgrade of the patch notes, and the 0.04% auto rifle buff stood out as being particularly absurd and meaningless. It has since become a meme among the community, and people remember it as by far the most useless update of all time. The Hildian Seeker. This was a very popular ship from Destiny 1, acquired from the Prison of Elders. There was also another ship with the same style later in D1, but it was never actually made into D2 as an earnable reward. However, in Season 15, it was added to the helm, leading some players to believe that it might become a seasonal reward or some other form of obtainable loot. Still to this day though, we've yet to receive this type of awoken ship in Destiny 2. Raiding in a social space. Many raids start out in what appears to be like a patrol area, but in reality it's just you in your own private instance. However, the Vault of Glass from Destiny 1 was the only Destiny raid to ever begin in an actual social patrol space. Blueberries could join in from the world and help you complete the first encounter, giving the raid a unique collaborative feel. The renewed focus on PvP. In a Vidoc from several years ago, Bungie made the claim that there would be a, quote, renewed focus on PvP, giving many players a lot of hope for the future. However, that statement was ironically followed by the longest drought in PvP content the game had ever seen, with players waiting over 1,000 days for a single PvP map to be released. Players, of course, turned that entire situation into endless memes, but the memes have died down considerably now that the renewed focus on PvP has actually arrived like 5 years late. The 15th Wish. Back in 2018, players discovered these codes within the game that could be input into this wall in order to grant wishes. These wishes included special rewards like emblems, hidden chests, and teleportation to certain encounters within the raid called Last Wish. In total, we found 14 codes. But then, strangely, we discovered a triumph stating that there were actually 15 total wishes. This began an intense search for the 15th wish, with players forming all kinds of conspiracy theories and scouring literally every inch of the Dreaming City location. They found absolutely nothing, but people kept looking and thus began one of the most prolonged mysteries in Destiny history. Perhaps the most interesting theory was related to a lore entry. It said that if you got to 999 power and then soloed the final boss within the dungeon called Shattered Throne, you would unlock the true ending of the Dreaming City. It took over a year for someone to reach 999 power, but then everyone watched with great anticipation as the highest power level player in the world grinded for an average of 18 hours per day to finally complete this challenge. After reaching 999 power, he entered the dungeon, defeated the final boss, and then nothing happened. Very anticlimactic, considering that we waited over a year for this moment. A few days later, Savathun apparently took control of Bungie's weekly update blog and mentioned that this whole thing was just a trick. Eventually, Bungie removed the 15th Wish Triumph from the game, leading players to believe that it was no longer able to be completed and maybe did not even exist in the first place. Years passed, and it seemed that this mystery was ancient history and would never be solved. In a shocking turn of events, though, the 15th Wish was brought back to the game to be the central plot in Destiny's final ever season called Season of the Wish. As it turned out, the final wish was actually our only way to pursue the witness into the Traveler, making this wish one of the most important things in the entire history of the Light and Darkness saga. This was something that Bungie's narrative team had been considering for a long time. They wanted to find a way to create a payoff for the 15th Wish since it was such an important piece of the community's history. They didn't want to do it in just some obscure lore card or side quest though, because that would be far too disappointing. At the end of everything, it's fascinating to think that simply due to the community's obsession with the 15th Wish, Bungie decided to use it as a narrative device to drive one of the most important events around the conclusion of the game's first major saga. It's all playable terrain. When Destiny's gameplay was first being shown off in like 2013, we got to see a work-in-progress version of the Cosmodrome destination. It was quite overhyped, as one of the developers set the unrealistic expectation of being able to explore all of the terrain that you could see in the gameplay.
All that stuff, if you ran out there, it's all playable terrain. I mean,
The video you just watched was titled "The Most Disappointing Thing About Destiny," and with over 400,000 views, it's safe to say that others were also disappointed by not being able to truly explore Destiny like an open-world game. What is Zavala's first name? This totally reminds me of that meme where people ask about Obama's last name, but in this case, Destiny players were wondering about the official first name of Commander Zavala. Perhaps jokingly, Destiny the meme suggested, what if Zavala's first name is actually just Commander? Like, Commander isn't his rank, it's his legal first name. However, it seems that that idea was actually disproven in a lore tab of this ship, where it contains the sentence, "Here in the darkness, his title dropped away and he was just Zavala," meaning that Commander is indeed just a title. Lance Reddick also made a post about the topic, saying that if Zavala did have a first name, he thought it would be Mortimer. Even though it has never been confirmed in the lore, some people have kind of accepted Mortimer as his unofficial first name in honor of Lance. The Spirit Bloom Chest Conspiracy. Back in the original Vault of Glass raid, there was this one chest near the Templar encounter that would award a planetary material called Spirit Bloom. For some reason, the community formed a very odd superstition about this chest, with some players believing that it could have an impact on the loot from the rest of the raid. It was pretty common to hear a call out from a teammate asking everyone to not open the Spirit Bloom chest because it could apparently reduce the chances of getting an exotic from the next chest up ahead. For some people, this was not taken too seriously, but many others thought it was actually real because myths like this tend to spread very easily and rapidly through the community. Sweaty Confetti Origins. The mod Sweaty Confetti causes your opponents to explode into a burst of colorful confetti, and this is likely a reference to Halo. The Grunt Birthday Party Skull Effect caused a similar confetti-like explosion and popping sound, and it seems this may be where the inspiration came from. Wipe for damage. Destiny will only show how much damage you've dealt to a boss if you fail and your fire team wipes. Therefore, some players will jokingly suggest that they want to wipe for damage so that everyone can check out the wipe screen and see how good they did. The long-lost helicopter move. If you've ever used the Arcstrider subclass, then you're probably aware that the super has a variety of different button combos that let you do different attacks and moves, such as this light-heavy attack that deals extra bonus damage. Back in the Destiny 2 trailers and beta, there was also this double light attack airborne combo that made the Arcstrider do this epic spin, which was referred to as the helicopter move. Players loved this attack in the beta, and visually it just looked really awesome. But when the game actually launched a few months later, Hunter mains were dismayed to discover that the move was completely removed from the game. I can't find any explanation about why this was removed, and it was seemingly forgotten about by the community, but some have speculated that it was done to prevent players from getting out of bounds. Nearly a decade later, the helicopter move finally returned with an aspect in the final shape, and although it's not part of the super, it at least now serves a purpose. Actually, we die all the time. This one is about how we, as Guardians, are permanently dying basically every time we play the game. Without our ghosts, we are mortals, and technically speaking, we do not have our ghosts in the respawn restricted zones. So whenever you see this screen with the words "your light fades away," that is actually the permanent final death of your character. But since this is a video game, of course we just get to try again and go back to the last checkpoint. It's kind of funny because you probably have so many memories of wiping over and over and respawning, but canonically, our Guardians have flawlessly executed every single mission in a darkness zone. Destiny the fantasy game. According to a presentation given at a game developers conference, the original idea for Destiny was to make it a fantasy game. No crazy space aliens or science fiction, just strange, magical creatures and epic-looking castles. One of the original fantasy ideas was called Dragon Tavern, and it was essentially a vision to make the exact opposite game of Halo. Eventually though, Bungie decided to combine the themes of science fiction and fantasy, calling the official genre of Destiny mythic science fiction. Exotac Angel Hunter. In early Destiny 1, players looking through the game files discovered an exotic hunter helmet known as the Exotac Angel Hunter. It was not released yet, but based on the game files, it was said to give increased accuracy after jumping. However, once it was released, this exotic was rebranded to become the Celestial Nighthawk, the exotic that allows your golden gun to just fire one extremely high damage shot. In honor of the Exotac Angel Hunter though, the Nighthawk had the hidden bonus of also providing accuracy after jumping all throughout Destiny 1. Reviving Zavala. Vanilla Destiny 2 had this mission called Homecoming, where Zavala would put up his bubble to survive the oncoming Cabal assault. However, if you just stood by idly and let him get assaulted for a really long period of time, it was eventually possible for him to just be defeated by this attack. You could then go over and interact with his ghost in order to revive him. He would spawn back in and sometimes do a yell or look angry before just going back to business as usual. Player behavior is canon. The civilians from the last city have some very interesting perspectives and thoughts on Guardian behavior. One time, a news organization called City Herald did an investigation into what Guardians do when they aren't fighting, and they just kind of assumed that we would behave like other ordinary residents of the last city. But after actually observing our behavior, they wrote, "Readers, I was wrong. Guardians dance a lot more than we do. Sometimes they kind of dance at each other, if you know what I mean. I feel like I'm watching the Nature Channel." Ouch, really? The Nature Channel? There's also another example where random citizens of the last city took notes about Guardians pelting each other with snowballs and then yeeting themselves off the top of the tower. It seems that there would also need to be some kind of splash zone surrounding the tower because of all the falling Guardian bodies. It would obviously not be safe for regular citizens to inhabit the splash zone. Overall, I just love that our silly player behavior is official lore within the game. The Cabal play fantasy football. The Lightfall Collector's Edition unveiled some rather interesting information about how the Cabal actually play their own version of fantasy football. According to the lore, the Cabal draw up these legions from real Cabal soldiers, and then the real-life performance of these soldiers determines the success of the imaginary legion. Apparently, it's also considered bad luck to draft your own unit. Zero Power Gear. Way back in the early days of Destiny 2, we acquired an extremely bad common rarity gear set that happened to be power level 0. This gear was quickly replaced by better greens and blues, and almost everyone deleted their trash level 0 gear, but interestingly, some people decided to hold on to it. Years later, that gear alongside a couple of weapons is the only stuff that can be power level 0, and therefore they are considered to be pretty cool collector's items. Since all loot in the modern game drops at an already high power floor in the thousands, this old stuff is the only possible way to reach a truly low power level. A tiny box of raisins. During the first Halloween event called Festival of the Lost, Eris Morn provided players with a tiny box of raisins. These did not seem to have any purpose other than annoying you and taking up space in your inventory. Many players still held onto them though, hoping that maybe someday they would transform into some secret objective or become useful. Exactly 1 year later, this actually happened and a purpose for the raisins was revealed. Players could bring them to the speaker along with 25 motes of light, and then he could transform them into a box of Ascendant raisins that featured this pretty awesome artwork. The Grimoire card even read, "Long ago, a legend foretold the ascension of the raisins." This was not the end of the story of the legendary raisins, though. You could go all around the tower trading the box of Ascendant raisins into multiple vendors as a part of an elaborate quest to finally return to Eris Morn, the person who started the whole thing in the first place by giving you the original raisins. To reward you for your efforts, she provided a bag of treats alongside the coveted Super Black shader and a delicious piece of celery. Although the quest was still possible for people who didn't save their raisins, it's nonetheless hilarious that a year-old box of raisins ended up giving perhaps the most popular shader in Destiny history. The wilted piece of celery that was given as a reward also had no purpose, so this started yet another cycle of players holding onto it and hoping that one day it would become Ascendant celery or something useful for a quest. Spoiler alert, nothing ever happened in Destiny 1, but the celery did make an appearance in Destiny 2. The new item was called Charred Celery, and it read, "We truly lost some of our greatest possessions in the attack on the tower." It could be turned into Cade 6 at the tower, and we haven't seen anything related to the celery ever since. The final thing related to this whole story was that there was also an Ascendant Artichoke that could be turned into Cade as well, and it read, "Apparently, Cade thought it necessary to expose this extremely rare vegetable to a hive summoning ritual." Interestingly, this exact same icon for the Ascendant Artichoke was reused years later as the Trials of Osiris memento. Shaxx coaches dodgeball. In a fan-favorite lore entry, Lord Shaxx once lost a bet with Cade, and his punishment was that he had to coach a few children of the Last City for their dodgeball tournament. He was extremely reluctant to do so, but Cade seemed to find it quite entertaining. So the two traveled to where the competition was taking place, and Cade explained how he needed to pick two of the kids. He chose two that he thought were the smartest, and then they had to explain the rules of dodgeball because Shaxx was completely unfamiliar with the game. Therefore, he didn't have a bunch of advanced dodgeball strategies to share, but he did give them a motivational speech, and he instructed his team to, quote, crush them. Balance changes are canon. When the Beyond Light expansion first dropped, it was clear that the new stasis element was far too overpowered. It became basically the only thing used in PvP, and every game just became a chaotic mess of freezing and slowing everywhere. Bungie eventually had to nerf stasis many times to bring it back in line, and they made these changes official canon within the lore. It read, "People were turning against stasis, didn't like what it was doing to their crucible. So stasis made itself nicer, so we'd keep using it." There was also a funny reference to the nerf of the extremely overpowered Suros regime where Zavala says, "I won't roll back the Suros Crucible firmware to its original, preposterously inflated state." It's pretty awesome how they sneak these funny little notes into the lore as a nod to the crazy metas we've seen over the years. We are about to progress into the middle of the iceberg. This tier contains a lot of the community secrets and stories, interesting lore tidbits, and a few interesting conspiracy theories. We've now descended beyond the surface level, and at this depth, the water is starting to get noticeably darker. Dave Samuel in Vidocs. Dave Samuel is a lead visual effects artist at Bungie. However, despite his job revolving around visual effects, he has become most famous in the Destiny community for his dramatic sound effect recreations. Here are a few of my favorites.
3 sources of power, and then those then get launched out, and then those fly through the air. You're like the Arc Wizard. The sparks go out, and then goes out, captures the other guys. It's just a little bit more exciting.
Dave has been doing these amazing impressions in Bungie's Vidocs for many years now, and it's always one of the most entertaining parts of the video for those who know to keep an eye out for it. Black Rarity Loot. There have been many rumors over the years of a mysterious rarity even more elite than exotics. Exotics are pretty unique and powerful as they are, so we can only imagine how insane black tier loot would be. Due to exotics becoming more and more common over the years, it would make sense to add a new rarity sometime in the future. And it might actually happen. During an interview, Bungie developers did say that if a new rarity were to be added, it would definitely be black. 2 tokens and a blue. D2 launched in a pretty rough state, and part of this struggle was due to the now infamous system called the token system. Instead of earning loot, you would instead earn tokens, and then you could feed these into slot machines to randomly generate your rewards. Along with the fact that weapons had no random rolls back then, this made the loot feel incredibly unrewarding, and this was a major criticism of the game at the time. So during a reveal stream for the first expansion, players were desperately hoping that the loot issues would be addressed. But instead, here is what we actually got.
I promised before that this was the most rewarding public event.
Suffice it to say, players were dismayed to discover that the most rewarding public event was going to give 2 tokens and a blue, making the loot essentially meaningless. Paul McCartney. One of the legendary Beatles, Paul McCartney, worked directly on a lot of the music for Destiny. In fact, this horn melody that you're hearing in the background was written by Paul McCartney himself. If you've ever played the game, I'm sure you recognize it as one of the most iconic Destiny melodies. Paul McCartney also wrote a Destiny song called Hope for the Future, and even produced a full music video where you can see a ghost creating a projection of him singing. I also managed to find a behind-the-scenes video of them filming him and turning him into this hologram. Many people assume that his contributions to the Destiny franchise end there, but McCartney also worked deeply on 5 of the 8 Music of the Spheres tracks, which are the foundation for the Destiny soundtracks. To this day, the melodies he wrote can be heard throughout all of the music in the games, and especially within Destiny 1. Enemies noticed that we love to dance on their corpses. Within the official canon of the game, the Cabal have noted that Guardians love to dance on their corpses. A lore card reads, survivors reported Guardians foraging for equipment, dancing, and performing acrobatics with light vehicles. Comet Plague of Darkness. This entry is referring to a leak that came out in 2015, featuring the plans for the next several years of Destiny content. Of course, we now know that this leak was not entirely accurate compared to the content that was actually released, but it's really interesting to see expansions that we never got, including stuff like Comet Plague of Darkness and Vex Void. Comet was originally planned to be a massive shift in the Destiny universe that would be a big Year 2 expansion in place of the Taken King. Interestingly, the original plan was to release Comet and then release Destiny 2, and then actually Comet 2 immediately after. It seems that these Comet expansions were meant to be the heavy lifters that delivered the most significant updates, and considering that they actually line up with the Taken King and Forsaken, it kind of makes sense why these expansions were so excellent in retrospect. From the very beginning, they were planned to be the biggest content releases that Destiny would ever see. Another detail that most people don't know about is that Comet was actually supposed to deliver Europa and several new parts of Earth and Mars to Destiny 1 in 2015. It's just crazy to imagine another timeline where these parts of the game actually existed back then, in addition to everything else that came out with Taken King. It's pretty certain that these 2015 destinations were eventually added with Destiny 2, with the EDZ, Europa, and Io. The Mars destinations were repurposed to create Io at launch, but they were essentially just the same environments and the same types of structures and landscapes. Vex are not robots. A lot of people tend to assume that the Vex are these robotic beings that we see walking around, but this actually is not the case. In reality, the Vex are living organisms suspended in mind fluid, and they merely exist within their mechanical frames. So although it might seem that the Vex are a crazy race of robots, they're actually just tiny beings piloting these machines. Blog post cats. Within Bungie's weekly update articles, they tend to have a strange tendency of sneaking small hyperlinks that lead to funny cat pictures or GIFs. So the next time you're reading and you see a link that looks a little bit out of place, try clicking on it and see what happens. The 7th Vault of Glass chest. Back in Destiny 1, many players believed there to be a hidden 7th chest somewhere within the Vault of Glass. Due to Bungie doing everything in the number 7, this seemed like a reasonable theory, and the legend of the 7th chest became pretty popular among the community. There was also this platform with a Vex portal that many people thought might somehow be related to this elusive 7th chest. Years passed and the chest was never found, but in the original version of the Whisper mission, there was a similar looking Vex portal that seemed to be traveling to the Vault of Glass as a nod towards the myth of the 7th chest. After even more time had passed, this player posted on Reddit claiming to have finally found the 7th chest. After all of this time, the legend of the 7th chest seemed to finally have been solved. The player had to travel out of bounds, and he found the chest mysteriously floating in the sky, so it did seem to be completely legitimate. Eventually though, it was discovered that this was actually just one of the other chests from a different part of the raid, and not a genuine 7th chest. For some unknown reason, this chest exists both within the actual raid, and then also floating in the middle of nowhere. Some of the mystery remains alive though, with Bungie developers claiming as late as 2023 that there might still be undiscovered chests within Destiny's raids. EDZ and Mercury in Destiny 1. In some of the early D1 trailers, we can actually see the European Dead Zone and Mercury, confirming that they were indeed in development and part of the original Destiny 1 launch. The EDZ is the largest destination ever made, so it would have been absolutely crazy to have both of these in Vanilla D1. It's also kind of weird to think that 2 out of the 4 planets in Vanilla D2 were originally created back in like 2013. As we also just discussed a few minutes ago, Io was largely created before Destiny 2 released to be a location on Mars. A Pyramidian structure can be clearly seen in the background of this Mars PvP map, and also data miners found plenty of other evidence that it was a scrapped location inside of D1. So technically speaking, 3 out of the 4 destinations that shipped with Destiny 2 were mostly created before Destiny 1, way back in 2013. Fallen Nightclub. This entry refers to a fallen lost sector that existed on the Tangled Shore, where a full nightclub including a DJ, bouncer, shanks with drinks on top of them, and you could even activate the music and have the game play Paul McCartney's song Hope for the Future. I can't play it here because this is YouTube, but it was absolutely amazing to discover this place for the first time. The number 7. Ever since the beginning of the company, Bungie has constantly included the number within their games and branding, like right here on the upper right corner of their official profile picture. That part of it is well known, but there are some more strange details here that are much more obscure. The Bungie store sometimes features items that cost $777,777.77, but can be made affordable with a discount code. Bungie Day is also on 7/7 or July 7th every year, and of course, the name Destiny itself has 7 letters in it. Remember the Fractaline stock market event that I was talking about recently? Well, it's no coincidence that that event made us raise a total of $9,777,777,700 to complete the goal. Even though it isn't very commonly used, the term the 7th column is the official name that Bungie has given to the community. Perhaps the strangest one, though, is the 7th column of the periodic table of the elements is called halogens. Certainly, it's no coincidence that the basic definition of halogen is something that makes salt, and that it's in the 7th column, and that Bungie has named the community the 7th column. Also, there is one final reference to the number 7, but it's going deeper down in the iceberg because it's one of the most disturbing facts in this whole video. The Basketball Court of Oryx. Within the Kingsfall raid in Destiny 1, the community found a special room that looked like a basketball court where you could dunk an orb into a hoop. People searched for ages to try to find a hidden minigame, a hidden chest, or some other sort of puzzle here, but Luke Smith confirmed that the dunking was the extent of the basketball court, and there was also no loot to be found. The Fate of All Fools. This story refers to an exotic weapon called the Fate of All Fools. It is unique in Destiny history as it is the only exotic weapon to ever be owned exclusively by one single player. This player's name is Eric, and it all started when his wife made a post on Reddit about how he had gone through 7 brain surgeries in the past 11 months. She said he loved Destiny so much that he would describe it in great detail to his neurologist. Apparently, he was more concerned about the surgery interfering with Destiny's release than he was about the actual surgery itself. The post blew up on Reddit, and eventually the people at Bungie took notice and decided to give him the exotic called Fate of All Fools. Nobody knew this, but this was absolutely perfect for him because scout rifles were his favorite type of weapon and he wanted one that could deal solar damage, just like the Fate of All Fools. It was really special to see the whole community come together and have Bungie give him such a unique and awesome gift. The name Fate of All Fools itself is assumed to be a reference to one of Bungie's older games called Marathon 2. After defeating his arch nemesis over a moon, one of the Marathon 2 characters carved this into the moon's surface, which is Latin for the just fate of fools. To bring this whole story to a happy conclusion nearly a decade later, Eric is alive and doing well. His wife posted an update saying that his recovery has been remarkable and he is doing better than anyone ever expected. Even though his exotic weapon bears similarity to the No Time to Explain and Jade Rabbit, it remains the only one-of-a-kind exotic to ever exist in Destiny history. Scrapped D1 storyline. Prior to the launch of Destiny 1, there was a completely different story for the game that just got entirely deleted. When the original story was presented to the higher-ups for approval, they decided that they didn't like it and made the narrative team start over from scratch. This was a moment of pure panic at Bungie Studios because they were just months away from the original launch date of the game. Everybody had to scramble to remove all of the old story, rewrite and re-record everything, and insert an entirely new story into the game in a very short period of time. We only have limited information about what the original story was like, but we do know that Crow was a central focus and he would accompany us on missions and explore the mysteries of the collapse. Our ghost was actually not a central focus at all, and he ended up being in the final game because Crow was essentially taking his place in the original game. The Vanguard leaders, Cade, Ikora, and Zavala weren't really in the story at all. Of course, this is wildly different from the actual story in the game we received, so it's just crazy to think about how all of this changed in such a short time before D1's original launch. We will probably never know what else we missed out on. Shax's mixtape. In Zavala's office, there is a mixtape that Shax made for him. It is extremely long, but here is a short part of it.
Magnificent. Now stay focused.
Japan exclusive dance trailer. This one refers to a Destiny 2 Japanese trailer called Freestyle Playground, where a hunter is dancing in the middle of nowhere and then eventually a whole group of guardians join in and start doing all kinds of crazy moves. There are only a handful of live-action trailers that have ever been made for Destiny, and this is easily one of the least known about due to its Japanese origin. It's incredibly well done, and although we can't be 100% certain about this, many people believe that this massive dance-off is canon within the game. The War Mantis armor set reads, "The more we danced, the more the Cabal BattleNet lit up with requests for intelligence." D is for Destiny. This is a children's book created by artists and writers at Bungie. It's a rhyming alphabet book using a bunch of Destiny universe terms like Cabal and Fallen. The Forklift. Way back in Destiny 1, we had these awesome racetracks for the Sparrow Racing League, but there was this one forklift that became infamous due to it being placed in a highly inconvenient location. It seems like one of the map designers deliberately placed it right in the middle of the track, and players would constantly crash into it and lose a race as a result. For this reason, many memes were created about this hilarious and immovable forklift. That wizard came from the moon. This is an iconic Dinklebot voice line that was so bad it got cut after the game's alpha. Following an intense fight with one of our first campaign bosses in the game, Peter Dinklage sounded like he had an absolute epiphany as he uttered the unremarkable phrase,
"That wizard came from the moon."
Despite all of the negativity and roasting of this line, Bungie embraced it and probably made $1 million from selling t-shirts featuring the phrase. The shirts were far from the only thing that were inspired by this voice line though. You might remember that 2014 was the era of the Ice Bucket Challenge, where people would dump a bucket of ice water on their head while calling out their friends or random people on social media and challenging them to do the same. On August 21st, 2014, Destiny's Ghost was also nominated to take the Ice Bucket Challenge in a video called "That Bucket Came from the Moon." In the video, you can see a hive wizard on the moon conjuring up a bucket of water and then sending it flying off into the distance, all the way to Earth and then directly on top of our ghost. And of course, the joke simply wouldn't be complete without the following.
"That came from the moon."
You're married to Shax. Shax does not have an extensive backstory, and we don't know nearly as much about him as we know about the other characters. However, one thing that we do know for certain is that we are actually married to him. Technically, anyone who got the vow bow during the Crimson Days is now married to Lord Shax, at least according to the lore. Male Cabal. This entry is about the fact that male Cabal are the ones who give birth and breastfeed. They also have a kind of pouch like kangaroos where they can store the baby Cabals. The more I learn about their strange anatomy, the more perplexed I become. Self-inflicted water damage. In D1, there was a strange mechanic where if you stood in water, it would allow you to shoot near your own feet and then actually hit yourself. I guess you could say this was splash damage. Expired ramen coupons. Following Cade's death in 2018, we received a quest where we could visit the ramen shop in the tower and purchase these strange ramen coupons that apparently expired years ago. The strange and suspicious part was that you could actually continue purchasing these over and over, leading to some players completely filling up their inventory with these coupons. These players were hoping that these coupons could maybe be used for a secret upcoming objective or quest. Some people were remembering the tiny box of raisins situation where they became useful after a year of irrelevance, so you could argue that it was logical to hold on to these coupons just in case. In hopes of this happening, the Twitter account called Destiny the Meme made an awesome emblem concept called the Never Expiring Coupon. Many players agreed that something like this would be a fun way to acknowledge the players who held onto their coupons for many years. A former Bungie employee did reveal that there was a plan for the expired coupons within the following season, but that idea was eventually canned. Unfortunately, he, quote, didn't get a chance to do more design work, and therefore was unable to follow through with his plans of creating a quest involving the coupon about 8 years ago. Players assumed that the story was done and this would be the end of it, but to everyone's surprise, the legend of the ramen coupon actually made a return in 2024. During the Into the Light event that led up to the final shape, there was a random quest in the tower to find the missing robot dog named Archie. This quest had multiple steps on multiple weeks, but it basically involved searching for clues and paw prints. When you finally solved the quest and found Archie though, you could return to 801 and acquire that same ramen coupon from the good old days. This also completed a triumph and awarded a shader called Blue Steel. To tie everything together, I also found that the collector's edition of the final shape includes these coupons, and they come with a special note attached. These coupons don't expire. Use them anytime. In combination with the previously mentioned quest, this was a great way to give some closure on the ramen coupon mystery and finally acknowledge the interest from everyone in the community. It seems that Bungie has been recently taking an initiative to tie up loose ends with topics like the 15th Wish and the coupons, which is really cool to see after all of these years. Back on the reef in D1, there was a spot that didn't have a kill barrier, so you could just fall under the map and chill. It was a pretty fun time. Hive are afraid of fusion rifles. Apparently, Hive considered disintegration from fusion rifles to be extremely scary and traumatic because they believe that their deaths yield no soulfire, giving them a difficult time in the afterlife. The same also applies to trace rifles and anything else that is capable of disintegrating the Hive and leaving behind no armor or fragments of ash. Used toothbrush. Upon completing a quest back in 2019, Eris would give you a bag of goodies, which included a toothbrush. The toothbrush could actually be used, but then it would get replaced in your inventory with a new item called Used Toothbrush. Since the item featured the description text of perhaps it can be used later, players have been reading way too far into this for years and desperately hoping that there will someday be a hidden purpose for the used toothbrush. In all likelihood, it's just a trash item with no use, but thousands of players still held onto it in their inventories just in case. In late 2023, Bungie stealth removed the used toothbrush without saying a word about it. Although about 99% of players were probably just completely unaware of the toothbrush to begin with, dedicated players were sad to see their toothbrush just disappear without any type of conclusion. Many had a sentiment like Reddit user Compy, who said, "Man, 4 years down the drain." Operation Save the New Lights. During Bungie's 30th anniversary event, there was an issue causing all new and returning players to get forced into the Dares of Eternity. These new and returning players were no match for the activity, considering that they were severely underleveled and did not have access to any of the champion mods needed to beat it. And thus began Operation Save the New Lights. Experienced players would intentionally lower their power level in order to match into the activity together with the noobs, and then equip all of their max level gear to help the new players beat it. Bungie officially endorsed this movement and incentivized veteran players to help out by offering an exclusive emblem to those who assisted the noobs. Even though this all began with an unfortunate situation, it was really cool to see the whole community come together for a good cause. Exohuman characteristics. This refers to the fact that exos are built with many human characteristics like the desire to eat, drink, and mate. This is because exos have human minds uploaded into their artificial bodies, and without regular human characteristics in these new artificial bodies, the mind would go insane and assume that the body was dead, leading to actual death. So basically, these so-called humanisms essentially allow exos to not reject their new bodies and survive. Ornaments are not just cosmetic. This refers to the fact that ornaments in Destiny 2 can actually have a big effect on gameplay, and they aren't just purely cosmetic. For example, the Chaperone ornament causes the barrel to become slightly longer. Due to some absolutely wild Destiny science that nobody completely understands, having a longer barrel on your weapon actually increases its range. So in effect, this ornament will increase the range of Chaperone just a little bit due to it making the barrel a few inches longer. At one point, Bungie said that they patched this, but I've tested it extensively and it still works in the game today. Another example of an ornament having a large effect on gameplay would be the Vigilance Wing ornament. This particular ornament makes the sights much more open so that you can clearly see your target, and this is a massive improvement over the original sight that you can see without an ornament. The original fire team is dead. When the Lightfall cutscenes and trailers were first revealed, the community began to speculate that the Guardians who die right here are actually the same original Guardians that we saw way back in the 2014 Destiny 1 trailer. However, after a bit of investigation, it seems that these are both just instances of Guardians wearing generic armor sets because they seem to be different genders in the two different trailers. This means that the original D1 trailer guardians are potentially still alive. We also learned later that the Titan we see here was named Reed 7, but his fire team was able to survive, including a warlock by the name of Shayura and a hunter by the name of Aisha. They were all part of a Trials fire team together, and you might recognize their names because they are featured on popular Trials weapons, such as the Reed's Regret, the Aisha's Embrace, and the Shayura's Wrath. Chair in the wall. This is a trick where you can use a chair or sitting emote in order to partially put your guardian inside of a wall. This makes it so that enemies cannot damage you with direct attacks. Doing this is particularly useful when you need to survive or cap an objective, like for example here you need to capture the Warsat while surviving. The history of April Fools. Bungie has seemingly stopped doing April Fool's jokes in recent times, but in the years surrounding the D1 launch they had some pretty great ones. The first one came in 2013 when Bungie made a satirical Vidoc about Tiger Man, the scrapped race from Destiny's development. In this video, we see sketches for the original concept and someone with hilariously heavy tiger makeup performing for the game. We then observe as his role is scrapped and he makes a dramatic exit from the studio. The following year, Bungie announced the ultimate collector's experience of the game, and this special edition would cost $7 million. This added cost came with some pretty cool perks though. Bungie promised to transform you into an Awoken or Exo like this, and then ship you off to Mars in real life to await the arrival of Destiny 1. Bungie's CEO made the following statement. At Bungie, we're always looking for exciting ways to immerse players in our fiction and our worlds, and what better way to maximize the potential of our passionate community than to physically alter and augment their frail human forms and fire the bravest and wealthiest among them into the cold and unforgiving vacuum of space. In 2015, Bungie would release their third and final April Fool's joke. When players visited the website to see their characters, all their guardians would just start dancing with a crazy light show playing in the background. The Dark Below was made in weeks. Following the release of Destiny 1, Bungie began to process the incoming feedback from the launch and prepare to release their first ever DLC called The Dark Below. However, once the feedback was absorbed from the launch, Bungie leadership decided to completely reboot both The Dark Below and the subsequent expansion called House of Wolves. According to one person who worked at Bungie at the time, they completely scrapped the DLCs and therefore they had to crunch out The Dark Below in just 9 weeks, which kind of explains why they didn't address any of the big issues with the game as a whole. This was done in part to redesign all of the missions and respond to feedback, but also to remove all the Peter Dinklage voice lines from the story. Overall though, it's typical for game developers to be working on future content for months or even years before it releases, so it's just crazy that they managed to create an entire Destiny expansion in just 9 weeks in 2014. The Great RNG Conspiracy. Ever since the early days of Destiny 1, there has been this meme about new players being unusually lucky with their loot. Even today, you'll hear about how the guy doing his first run of the raid will get the exotic, but the other people on his team who are on their 100th attempt still don't have it. This has culminated into a big conspiracy about how loot in Destiny works in general, with some people believing that the new and returning players do actually receive more favorable odds. I mean, it kind of makes sense from a business perspective. Like if you really hook in the new and returning players with some good loot, they'll be more likely to stick around and continue playing the game. On the other side of the coin, if you keep denying the best loot from dedicated players, you already know that they're going to keep grinding in the hopes of finally getting their perfect roll or extra rare exotic. This is actually a tactic that is used very transparently in other games. Like for example, you've probably noticed a bunch of mobile game ads where they always mention how new players will get a big bonus upon signing up for the first time as a way to incentivize them to try it out. Some people consider the whole RNG conspiracy in Destiny to be a joke, but there are also quite a few dedicated players who wholeheartedly believe that this is a real system that exists within the game. It would be quite a difficult thing to prove, but perhaps if I organized like a massive survey from everyone in my audience, we might be able to get some data that is statistically significant. The original Destiny director. Anyone who has ever played this game knows that there's a big map where you can select your destinations and activities, but it wasn't always planned this way. In the first reveal of Destiny, we can see that there was originally the last city at the top, then a chapter of the story called Shores of Time, then a bounty, strike, raid, and faction wars, which was presumably PvP. It also makes me wonder if perhaps in this version of the game, the factions were fighting against each other, and which faction you joined determined which team you would be on. Another perplexing thing about this original menu is that the raid uses the logo that we now know as the Lost Sector logo with just a couple of adjustments, and the strike also has a quite similar logo. Overall, though, this director is extremely simplistic and limiting, so I can see why they opted for the planetary map version instead. The character deletion scare of 2023. This all began when a Reddit user reported that their character was mysteriously deleted by no fault of their own. The deletion seemed to be permanent, so the entire community was just scared to log in and risk losing their guardian. Following an investigation from Bungie, they were able to come up with a one-time fix to restore this person's character, but this was actually just the beginning. In the following days, more and more people started reporting that their characters were being deleted, and they were showing images and videos of missing guardians on their character screen. To address everyone's concerns, Bungie replied with the following statement: "Maintaining your characters and progress is our top priority." After kicking off a deep dive investigation of a very low number of reports of missing characters out of an abundance of caution, we are confident that no characters or progress were incorrectly lost by our systems. After all of that drama and concern about people deleting their characters, it turns out that they were just trying to farm attention on the internet. As you can see by my reply here, I was just pretty confused because I couldn't believe anyone would actually delete their characters and lie about it just for a few Twitter likes. But I guess some people thought it was worth it. Interesting translations. This entry refers to the fact that Destiny is sometimes inaccurately translated into other languages, often with the intent of comedic effect. For example, the perk Slideways gives you some buffs for sliding, but when you play the German version of the game, the perk is just called whoosh with an exclamation point. Why the console reticle is not centered. When you play Destiny on console, you might have noticed that the crosshairs are actually not in the center of your screen by default. This was actually a very deliberate design choice by Bungie, and as you can see here, the reticle is actually quite a bit below the true center of the screen. By doing this, the game forces players to look slightly more upward, thus showing more of the sky and landscape and less of the ground in their immediate vicinity. According to a presentation that was given about this topic, this gives the overall feeling of making the world larger and more expansive. Although everyone can now just adjust the reticle and put it in the true center of the screen if they want to, it's interesting to hear about the original thought process and reasoning behind it being off-center. Hashtag remove Eververse. It's pretty funny, I actually forgot about this until recently, but following the launch of Destiny 2, there was this huge movement of people rebelling against microtransactions and using the hashtag remove Eververse. The entirety of the Destiny 2 forums were flooded with this message and nothing else, with thousands upon thousands of players all weighing in and sharing the reasons for disliking the store and the Bright Dust system. Like seriously, look at how many pages of complaints were happening at this time. People were pretty upset by the lackluster Curse of Osiris expansion, and also a large percentage of the new items were being locked behind the Eververse store. This movement also happened around the same time as the XP throttling system was discovered, so players were just really fed up with the monetization strategies and deception. Petra's name could be a pun. Some players have noticed that Petravenge sounds quite a bit like Pet Revenge, which also happens to tie into her plot quite a bit. However, this is almost certainly just a coincidence that was not at all intentional, even though it is rather interesting. Glitching into Last Wish. This entry refers to the story of how players learned to glitch inside of the Last Wish raid. About a week before the raid was available in the game, it was discovered that by going out of bounds and doing some complicated movements, you could actually go and get loot from a chest that would give you raid loot before the raid race even began. Players were flooding into the raid to collect their loot, and interestingly, it didn't even require you to own the Forsaken expansion. It has now been many years since this exploit was discovered, and yet it has still not been patched. Even as a free-to-play Guardian today, you can go claim some free Last Wish loot. Trevor. This entry refers to the terrifying robot creature within the 0 Hour mission who travels extremely fast and instantly annihilates you if he ever catches you. Since this name is an acronym, Bungie had to come up with their own idea of what it stood for. However, at the following GuardianCon event, they decided that they would instead let the community decide what the acronym actually meant. The audience was measured by the loudness of their applause, and the clear winner that was picked was Tame Relaxed Triple Vac Roommate. And thus it was decided that this would be the new official name for Trevor in Destiny 2. The true size of King's Fall. The King's Fall raid is quite large, but it's actually far more massive than most people realize. By exploring out of bounds in Destiny 1, you can reach certain areas that display the true size of this raid. It's actually so big that it is believed to be the largest explorable location in all of Destiny. You can even make your way outside and go on top of the entire Dreadnought ship itself. The Great Casino of Destiny. This refers to a time when Chinese players devised a genius strategy to go flawless in Trials of Osiris without ever fighting against a single player or securing a single final blow. The strategy functioned as followed. You began by equipping this ugly Hawke emblem, something that every player would have access to. This emblem signaled to players on the other team that you were in on this special strategy. When two Hawke emblems matched up against each other, they rolled a dice. The team that lost the dice roll would swap to different characters and then forfeit the game, granting a free win for the other team. However, since they swapped their characters before forfeiting, they did not receive a loss on their Trials card on their main character. Therefore, all teams doing this strategy could do this forever and nobody would ever lose a game on their main characters. This whole strategy was essentially just an elaborate way to win trade extremely efficiently, and it began to catch on and spread like wildfire in the community. The Trials Report website noted that over half of all players were going flawless that weekend, and over half of the flawless players reached the lighthouse with literally 0 eliminations during their games. Bungie caught on to this eventually, stating that, due to an issue, Trials of Osiris has been disabled for the remainder of the weekend. Pop-Tarts and Rockstar partnerships. In order to celebrate and promote the launch of Destiny 2, Bungie and Activision partnered with Pop-Tarts and Rockstar to make limited edition Destiny 2 themed product lines. Beginning with Rockstar, they had special cans designed for each of the classes. Purchasing these cans would give you codes for free engrams, and you could redeem up to 24 free engrams in total. These codes would also allow you to enter a drawing for more interesting prizes. Every day, they would draw a winner for a free copy of the game, which did cost $60 at the time. It was actually the limited edition of the game though, so it was technically more valuable. Each week, they would also draw a winner to receive a collector's edition of the game along with a free console. Finally, they also created 3 Destiny motorcycles that were given out as a grand prize, and it seems that there were only 3 of these ever created. They designed each of these to be inspired by a class from Destiny, so technically that means that each of these is actually one of a kind. The next year, they also created a unique Forsaken-inspired slingshot roadster that was fully street legal. Whoever won these vehicles, please DM me because I'd love to see what these actually look like in real life. Moving on to the Pop-Tarts promotion, this product line also included branding from each of the 3 classes with their logo and text reading Warlock Edition, for example. As a reward for buying these, players would receive 25% bonus XP within the game. However, due to the XP throttling system that we discussed earlier, this claim of bonus XP was incredibly misleading. For example, the throttling system would reduce your XP by like 90%, so then this small 25% boost was relatively inconsequential. Instead of getting 1000 experience, it would get throttled down to 100, and then the Pop-Tarts bonus would just increase it to 125. A particularly incensed Reddit user wrote an entire essay exposing this, stating that this is deceptive, this is manipulative, this is nefarious. Worst of all, this is false advertising. In addition to the XP bonus though, players could also earn this limited edition Red Sparrow if they happen to buy their Pop-Tarts from a target location in real life. Even though these promotions happened nearly a decade ago at this point and you can't redeem the bonuses anymore, I've heard that some people are still hanging on to a collection of unopened Pop-Tarts and Rockstar products featuring the Destiny branding. The Cistern Gang. The Cistern is a destination on Nessus with large open areas and plenty of room to move around. It also has tons of airspace that is considered to be in bounds, and for this reason it has become a favorite location for people who want to use various movement tech in Destiny 2. For example, this is a great place for learning how to sparrowfly or learning how to grapple onto a Lumina Noble round and fly through the sky. There is also a big red rooftop that you can visit, and many sparrow flying enthusiasts like to hang out here and test new forms of advanced movement strategies. These players are referred to as the Cistern Gang since they can often be found hanging out in various parts of the Cistern Patrol area here on Nessus. The Spider Tank. This is a spider tank owned by the Fallen, and ever since the earliest concept art was revealed for Destiny, these spider tanks have always been associated with the game. The funny thing is though, these are actually called Fallen Walkers, and the community merely gave them the nickname of spider tanks. It seems that the name just kind of caught on after they were shown in the first trailer of the game. I did also find in my research that they are also called Tenebrion in French, and according to this Reddit user, that is just a regular type of beetle. Perhaps the strangest thing about the Fallen Walker though is that they actually leave the Destiny Tricorn logo on the ground as a footprint. I mean, surely this is just an Easter egg and doesn't actually tell us anything meaningful about the Tricorn logo mystery, but it's still interesting nonetheless. It's also extremely difficult to see in-game, and since the walker tends to keep people rather busy and distracted, it seems that very few players have picked up on the interesting footprint pattern even after all this time. Gambit Prime Arena Cup. To celebrate the season of the Drifter and the Gambit Prime game mode, Bungie collaborated with a gaming arena company called Belong to host an official, in-person, competitive Gambit tournament. It looked like an actual esports event that you see in other ultra-competitive games, except they are just playing Gambit, which is kind of funny in retrospect. Fallout and Bife were the official commentators and hosts of the event, and it honestly looked like a lot of fun. It would be really cool to see Bungie create additional events like this at some point, and perhaps do something around the next major Destiny release. It does not rain in Destiny. This might just be for the sole reason of preserving graphical resources, but it seems that rain almost does not exist within Destiny 2. In fact, the only places it has ever been observed are in the Red War campaign and on Titan. It did also rain in Destiny 1 on Venus and in the Mars terraforming cutscene, but the distinct lack of rain in the rest of Destiny 2 does just seem a little bit odd. The fourth class and its icon. We're all familiar with the icons of the Hunter, Warlock, and Titan classes, but what about this additional icon? When Destiny 2 first released this concept art of the parade in the last city, you can see the icons from each class, and then there is also this icon that many people assumed to be a fourth class. This speculation was fueled by the hype surrounding Destiny 2 in 2017, but as it turned out, this icon was actually just meant to represent all three of the classes being united under one banner, with each section representing one of the three classes. This became even more clear when the same icon, now including the three class icons as well, was on display at the Destiny 2 reveal event. How do Guardians even see? Certain configurations of Exos in Destiny seem to have helmets that completely cover their eyes, and it seems that half of the armor in this game also has a design that would basically make vision completely impossible. I mean, if you take a look at Saint 14 or Shaxx, there is zero chance they are going to be able to see through their helmets, and you might be wondering how they are aware of their surroundings. Well, as it turns out, it seems that these types of armor have high-tech augmented reality systems installed inside them, which allow the Guardian to see their surroundings on a screen. Or in the case of an Exo, the image can be projected directly into their minds. The armor manufacturers must be really good at hiding the camera on the outside though, because I've yet to find a bunch of secret cameras all over my Guardian's armor. According to this lore, the Titan helmets are also designed to become see-through in case the optical system ever stops functioning. Pulled pork. Our ghosts tend to wander around for quite a while before they find someone who they actually want to resurrect into a Guardian. However, in the case of one ghost, he was taking an unusually long time to find his Guardian. He was jokingly given the name Pulled Pork by other ghosts, and he had been searching for his Guardian as long as any of them could remember. Eventually, it was Pulled Pork himself who resurrected Uldren, and then he was renamed to Glint. This bit was somewhat unconfirmed for a while, but it seems to be pretty certain now because Glint's voice actor put the phrase "I am Pulled Pork" in his Twitter bio. 8K Japan video. Earlier in the Iceberg, we discussed the craftening, the glitch that would let you craft the most absurd weapons you could possibly imagine. But to go a little deeper on that subject, we're going to explore the methodology that players use to achieve the desirable outcome of the bug. You see, it became apparent that it would be easier to activate the glitch if your computer was extremely overloaded, so people tried a bunch of different methods like opening up random programs in the background. However, the most effective strategy seemed to be playing extremely high-resolution YouTube videos, and thus a random 8K 60 FPS video of Japan became an extremely popular choice among Destiny players. They would load it up repeatedly and watch it over and over on tons of different tabs in order to lag their computers as much as possible. The owner of this video must have been extremely confused as to why their video started getting tens of thousands of views from Destiny players, and some left some pretty awesome comments like this one, where Cammy said, "Your dedication to the Destiny community is inspiring." Spider owns Starry Night. The Starry Night is a famous real-life oil painting by Vincent van Gogh, and apparently the Spider owns this painting in the Destiny universe. It seems he is basically a collector of artifacts from humanity's past, and it is even implied that he also owns the Mona Lisa. It is unclear as to why he has such a fascination with our past, but he does indeed have an extensive collection of treasures and relics in his possession. Nezarec dialogue. When completing activities on Neomuna, sometimes we just hear this strange, unintelligible whispering. However, these whispers can actually be decoded if you equip the Nezarec's Whisper Glaive or the Nezarec Sin exotic helmet. This is obviously because the massive rabbit ears allow you to hear him. Here is an example of the decoded whispering.
Line after line of circuitry, beckoning corruption.
We now approach the second to last level, the Deep. This level contains a lot of niche knowledge about the game that you'll probably only know if you've played for a really long time or if you've watched a hefty amount of YouTube videos. As we inch closer to the dark below, some of these entries begin to get pretty bizarre and unsettling. The Secret Golden Cyclops. When adventuring way out of bounds on Mercury, some players discovered a golden elite Cyclops deep underground. This is noteworthy because this is the only golden Cyclops known to ever exist. Could this be some kind of secret testing area that was used during development and was not supposed to be found by players? Was this model intended to be a boss but was ultimately scrapped? We will likely never know the true meaning of this enemy. There has only ever been one non-human guardian. This refers to the fact that Fellwinter was the only non-human guardian in history. Fellwinter was an Iron Lord warlock who was created entirely by Rasputin. Since Exos and Awoken are essentially both transformations of humans, this makes Fellwinter the only guardian who was never a human. Unused destinations. Destiny has several unused locations that are extremely strange and mysterious. Some of these locations appear to be fully finished areas that could be used within the game, and yet they are only accessible by exiting the map and exploring way out of bounds. The craziest example of a location like this would probably be the Galaxy Pools. This location is beautiful and has been in the game since launch, but for whatever reason it has no official purpose and isn't used for any type of quest or campaign. Another super interesting environment that people have found is this misty forest area. It has some trees that are actually destructible, implying that Bungie was at one point experimenting with adding destructible environments to the game. The Vex love rock music. You may know the Vex have the ability to time travel, but did you know that they are also massive fans of classical rock music? In fact, there is even a scannable on Nessus that implies that the Vex literally travel through time for the sole purpose of listening to classic rock.
Okay, somehow the Vex are listening to classic rock from the Golden Age. They're death robots with good taste in music.
Destiny Google Earth. Right before Destiny 1 launched in 2014, there was a system called Destiny Planet View where you could basically zoom around all of the locations just like you can on Google Earth. It was powered by the exact same technology from Google, and it was the first time Google had ever mapped out a complete video game. The website is still live today if you want to go poke around with it and explore the pre-launch version of Destiny 1 in the style of Google Earth Street View. If you discover all of the zones and points of interest, it gives you a special D1 emblem code. Crota's End and King's Fall Super Raid. Game director Luke Smith revealed on a podcast that the two raids called Crota's End and King's Fall were originally planned to be a single massive super raid. This raid was actually planned to be the first raid in Destiny 1, but it was eventually decided that since the end of the D1 campaign ended with a focus on the Vex, they wanted to also have a Vex-themed raid. And thus, the Vault of Glass was born, which by the way was originally called the Glass Throne. The Loot Cave wasn't actually good for farming. At the very start of this video, we covered the famous Loot Cave, the place where people went and farmed for endless engrams way back in Destiny 1. For many players, it felt like they just outsmarted Bungie and had discovered the secret to endless riches and glory. However, little did they know, Bungie was already aware of the Loot Cave before the game even launched. In an interview, a Bungie developer revealed that they discovered the Loot Cave in pre-launch testing, and then they decided to leave it in the game for a rather interesting reason. According to their testing, the Loot Cave wasn't actually a good place for farming. In fact, there were other farms that were far more efficient and rewarding than the Loot Cave. Based on this information, Bungie assumed that players would not choose to farm the comparatively inefficient Loot Cave and instead focus their time on more rewarding activities. Of course, they were mistaken, and people still loved the Loot Cave, and to this day, most people still incorrectly believe that the Loot Cave was actually the most efficient way to get loot in vanilla Destiny 1. I'm in trouble. This is an emblem that originated from the Mars community event, and it is hiding a secret message. It actually was completely unknown for months, but eventually somebody made a discovery. They found that if you scan the emblem as a spectrogram in order to convert it into sound, it seems to be saying, "I'm in trouble." This one still remains a mystery. It was never definitively linked to anything else or confirmed by Bungie. In fact, when someone first posted this on Reddit, the reply from community manager DMG implies that this emblem was not widely known about even within Bungie itself. This could be the result of a single emblem artist wanting to hide a secret message in their design, or it could be a more coordinated plan by multiple teams at the studio. We will probably never know, but overall it's fascinating to think that there could be other hidden messages in the game that we simply haven't found yet. 12 slides. This one continues to baffle players in the community. For some unknown reason, Guardians are incapable of sliding more than 12 times in a row within the game. It will simply stop you from sprinting and make you awkwardly crouch. If anyone who works at Bungie would like to explain this in the comments, that would be super interesting to learn about. Zavala crochets. Zavala is actually obsessed with crocheting, which is similar to knitting for those who might not know. We can find evidence of this through the yarn and other materials in his office, and we can also confirm that he has been crocheting at a high level for a long time because he teaches a crochet course meant for Titans. You can hear an announcement advertising this crochet course in the Destiny 1 tower.
All Titans interested in Commander Zavala's crochet course should speak with a friend for details.
Almost a decade after the announcement originally took place, Zavala also promised to teach Keitel how to knit and crochet following a public event on the derelict Leviathan. Somehow, I think her hands might be a bit large for this, and it may be a difficult skill to learn unless she somehow has obtained Cabal-sized crochet materials. Moth People. There is some concept art of a potential enemy race of Moth People that unfortunately never manifested as an actual in-game race. It includes cool notes like sounds of hair shaking at each step. The Hive do have some moth-like influence, so some people believe that the Moth People were cut and then folded into part of the Hive. The concept art also looks absolutely phenomenal, so I hope that someday we see something like this within the game. Komarov reference. Komarov is the name of a green armor set in Destiny 1. This name is a reference to Vladimir Komarov, the first person to ever die while on a space mission. Additionally, on this cloak of the cosmonaut, the description reads, Vladimir Komarov helped build and fly Earth's first ships. He gave his life to the frontier. Given Destiny's focus on space, this seems like a fitting tribute for someone who gave his life for space exploration. Destiny x Red Bull. Not to be confused with the Rockstar collaboration, Destiny also worked with Red Bull on a limited-time promotional campaign in 2015 with the goal of promoting the upcoming Taken King expansion. These wild-looking Destiny-branded Red Bull cans were sold at 7-Eleven and Walmart and offered exclusive in-game bonuses, a 50% XP buff, and a quest. The quest rewarded the SR1 Swift River Sparrow and the Joyride Ghost. Although this was cool, it did cause some controversy due to the pay-to-win nature of the collaboration. Some were upset that the quest and XP bonus required additional purchases, although it was announced that the content would eventually become free for all players in the future. There was also a huge issue with scammers stealing the codes, thus making legitimate buyers of the Red Bull cans unable to redeem their in-game bonuses because their codes had already been used. The codes were constructed using an extremely easy-to-guess pattern, so people discovered that they could simply generate the codes and get their hands on the rewards without spending a dime. Some people were probably also just reading the codes off the cans in real life and then putting them back on the shelves instead of buying them. With all of that aside, Red Bull also put out a surprisingly huge tournament event called Destiny Red Bull Clash Course. They flew out a bunch of top Destiny players to compete in a series of PvE challenges, and the winners received a $1,000 cash prize and the quote, ultimate gaming setup. The event was cast live on set by Mtasht and Holtzman, and it seemed like a nice way to celebrate the Taken King and, more specifically, the new strikes that it introduced. Golden coins in the tower. There used to be extremely tiny gold coins hidden throughout the tower. This was a mystery for a while, and anyone who stumbled across them was just confused as to why they were hidden in such strange locations. At one point though, Bungie revealed that these coins were actually part of a secret challenge within the game. The first person to collect all of the coins and send pictures to Bungie was awarded with a special emblem. Bungie tweeted out, "Have you found all 7 mysterious Easter egg coins in the tower?" Bungie.net user Slumdoggy has. The tale has a bit of an anticlimactic ending though, because instead of awarding him with a unique emblem, he was instead just given the emblem called the Sign of Opposing Will. This was the same Bungie bounty emblem, and at the time, this was obtained by beating the Bungie developers in the Crucible. Lament has breast pump sound effects. During the Beyond Light reveal Vidoc, Bungie mentioned how they have a lot of creative ways that they've sourced sounds for the game, including rather strange methods like recording the sound of a breast pump. It seems that the sound effects on the Lament exotic sword is what they were referring to. Here's what the sword sounds like. and here is what the breast pump sounds like. Tower announcements break the fourth wall. The announcements in the D1 tower would occasionally break the fourth wall by explicitly mentioning Bungie.net within the game. They would also occasionally make references to your mother. In-game proposal. 2 game developers actually got engaged at the tower in Destiny 1. They were given a custom proposal emote and wedding warlock bond in order to facilitate this special event, and there was even a custom letter left in the postmaster. The couple had originally met through a video game, so it was very nice of Bungie to help them organize this special moment. Cabal can change their size. This one is referring to how Cabal can increase in size depending on how prideful they feel. For whatever reason, their feelings of pride are linked to the release of their growth hormone. So for example, this is why Keidel's Cabal are so huge, as they have a deep respect for their leader and take pride in fighting together with her. By comparison, the basic boring Cabal out in the patrol are much smaller and less prideful. The Counterbalance Conspiracy. This was an extremely strange conspiracy theory that circulated in early 2023. Some players were claiming that the Counterbalance mod would actually provide a tangible benefit to players using spread shotguns in PvP. Destiny is notoriously difficult to test and gather data on, so it was ultimately unclear if the Counterbalance mod was actually helping the performance or consistency here. Later on, we asked Bungie developers about it on a podcast, and they confirmed that the mod does not improve the performance or consistency of shotguns. Raining engrams. There used to be an extremely rare glitch that sometimes caused infinite engrams to rain from the sky. There are very few documented instances of this happening, but I managed to find a couple videos that I'll show here. Apparently this was caused by defeating a ton of enemies in a single location within a short period of time. Xur's broken spine. The reason why Xur is always so hunched over is actually because he has a broken spine according to the lore. Here is Xur's voice actor reading the lore about himself.
He caroms off a dewy boulder with a sickening crunch. That is his spine. He will never stand straight again.
Hidden Korean vendor. Unless you're the 0.2% of my audience from Korea, you've likely never seen this vendor in-game before. She is located between Ikora and Hawthorne and has some rather interesting offerings for sale. In order to actually buy her exotics though, you need to be an IGR benefactor, meaning Internet Gaming Room. These are gaming and e-cafes located exclusively in South Korea, and the vendor herself will only actually appear if you're playing the game from Korea. Additionally, you can only rent these exotics and not truly buy them, so it's not really pay to win. An interesting detail is that when you interact with her, she states that she is a merchant of the Mongonggwa Legion. This is the name for the Korean rose flower, which is the national flower of South Korea. Wall breach technology. There have been a few wild glitches in Destiny history that allowed players to simply walk through walls. Various emotes have basically just let you step directly inside of walls and stay there permanently. This made it incredibly easy to just go out of bounds literally everywhere, and it was also pretty funny to see people just go inside of solid objects. Alpha Loopy ARG. This refers to an alternate reality game created by Bungie to market the original release of Destiny. Over the span of a week, a strange Bungie account by the name of Alpha Loopy released cryptic messages, images, and web pages meant to be decoded by the community. From scrambled images to hidden QR codes, there were a variety of puzzle types that needed to be solved. The first reward was a piece of Destiny music, and in fact, this was the first ever music track released. It predates all of the trailers and gave us our first taste of the epic music the game had to offer. The music was later used within the actual game's title screen and tower. In addition to the music, we also got this image, which is apparently a visual mathematical representation of the theory behind Destiny's soundtrack. It is extremely complicated and hard to explain, but to sum it up, the circles and other elements represent both the notes and the progressions of the music. Following the completion of the puzzle, the big reveal called Pathways Out of Darkness announced Destiny and gave us our first in-depth look at the game. It's on Enceladus. Back in Forsaken, during the quest mission to acquire the Ace of Spades, we listened to Cade's audio logs where he left secret messages. In one message left for Petra, he said to tell Paladin Oran, "If the sun over Nessus escapes nebula cycle, evac labor after dawn, under solstice." The first two words, Paladin Oran, are actually just an awoken code phrase that indicates the rest of the word is a code, and in this case, it can be deciphered by taking the first letter of each word. These letters spell out, "It's on Enceladus." This one is quite a mystery because we don't really know what he is referring to that is on Enceladus. Enceladus is a moon of Saturn, and at the time, many people speculated that it would be the location of the Deepstone Crypt. However, that theory was obviously canned once we realized that it was actually on Europa, a moon of Jupiter. Although the following is a somewhat boring explanation of this whole situation, I believe that the truth is probably that the Deepstone Crypt was originally planned to be on Enceladus, and then they just switched it to Europa after recording this voice line. This is evidenced by the fact that there is Bungie Enceladus concept art that was later repurposed and used as inspiration for Europa. However, even if this is all true, the reference to Enceladus is still canon, meaning that Cade is telling us that there is something indeed there. His voice line was never retconned, and we may never know what actually does exist on Enceladus. Dragonflies are a mystery. It seems that nobody in the Destiny universe actually knows what a dragonfly looks like. The people appear to believe that it is some unusual creature that may or may not have existed in the past. If you read the flavor text on this helmet, it says, "Scholars disagree on whether the mythical dragonfly ever really existed." This is all rather strange though, because dragonflies do actually exist in the Destiny universe, and we could see them flying around on the Shores of Time Crucible map in Destiny 1. So I guess the conclusion here could be that since nobody knows what dragonflies look like, they are unable to recognize them, and therefore they came up with a new name for the actual dragonflies. This seems reasonable because after all, if you don't know what a dragonfly looks like, you would have a hard time identifying one. Glorbo. Glorbo is the name of a non-existent raid boss created with the goal of deceiving artificial intelligence. This actually started in the World of Warcraft community when players realized that conversations on Reddit were being scraped by artificial intelligence. The AI would constantly monitor Reddit, analyze it, and then regurgitate the information into trashy articles with the goal of extracting ad revenue. These articles were extremely low quality, very annoying, and were often factually incorrect. These websites were also pretending that the articles were written by humans and they credited real people, making the whole situation even more disgusting. In order to expose the AI, Reddit users started having a lot of conversations about the made-up boss named Glorbo, and the prank quickly started trending among players. Thinking that Glorbo was an extremely hot topic in the community, the AI started churning out tons of garbage articles like, "World of Warcraft players excited for Glorbo's introduction." When the Destiny community started to also see trashy AI articles pop up, we also began to troll the AI with Glorbo. We convinced it that Glorbo was some sort of secret powerful raid boss by creating posts like, "I just want to say the new Glorbo secret boss has been the best content I've played in a while." And sure enough, as soon as Glorbo started trending, the following post went up on an AI-generated website. "Where to find Glorbo, the secret boss in Destiny 2. The Destiny 2 player community has recently discovered a strategy around Glorbo, the secret boss that's making waves." Players continued the Glorbo trolling with obvious factual errors and hilarious comments like, "Ever since we found the first secret boss, Glub Glub, back in Season of the Tokyo Drifter, there have been more hints that he had a brother." It seems that this trend started to get a bit over the top when players posted about deleting your character in order to make a sacrifice to Glorbo. Some extremely dense people must have actually fallen for this and complained to Bungie, because a few days later they tweeted out, "Sigh, I can't believe we have to say this, but please don't sacrifice your character in the name of Glorbo." After the AI articles were exposed for pretending to be authored by real people, the websites took them all down. The overall Glorbo saga was internet comedy gold, and I'm glad that we were able to remove the low-quality articles from our community. Desk Tiny. This is a Destiny parody game that I've been watching develop on Twitter for some time now. In the trailer, you can see that it's developed by Bongo, and as it progresses, I'm sure you'll recognize many familiar elements. It has all of the typical activities like strikes, raids, and PvP, and even some special things from Destiny's past. For example, here's their rendition of No Land Beyond, and you can also see it in action within the trailer. Everything is just so hilariously low-res and looks like an odd fusion of modern gaming and finger painting created by a 6-year-old. In 2023, they said that the beta for this game was coming very soon, but then they never released it and said that it was being delayed and development was slowed. Perhaps it will never actually come out, but if it ever does, I'll definitely be checking it out and I'll report back on how fun it is to play. Marathon Easter eggs are in Destiny. Well, it seems that there are undiscovered Easter eggs within Destiny that relate to Bungie's other upcoming game, Marathon. In a now deleted thread on Twitter, user GPH asked, "Have you left an Easter egg in Destiny for your new IP? I would be disappointed if there wasn't." Christopher Barrett, an executive producer at Bungie, simply replied with yes. He proceeded to delete that entire thread and this reply though, so it remains unclear if there actually are a bunch of Marathon Easter eggs hidden within Destiny. The NASA Emblem Story. The Shadowkeep expansion introduced a hidden emblem called Orbital Cartographer. This emblem wasn't exactly difficult to get since you just needed to loot this satellite while running through a lost sector, but few people really understood its significance nor the fact that the emblem was actually dedicated to NASA. The emblem is based on a badge for the satellite called the Luna H-Map, which was scheduled to travel to the moon in 2021. Its mission was to search for water and then eventually crash land near the south pole of the moon after its mission was complete. The satellite where you loot the emblem in Destiny is indeed the same satellite that was launched in real life, giving a subtle nod to NASA and giving players a cool emblem at the same time. An article released during Shadowkeep called it a little tribute which helps make the game feel more grounded in reality. Funny enough though, this whole entire thing actually is not grounded in reality. Bungie created this Destiny content in 2019, and since the real mission wasn't scheduled until 2021, Bungie was just assuming that things would go as planned. However, part of the satellite failed, and therefore it actually never ended up crash landing on the moon, which is where they put it in the game. Instead, it has now ceased operations, and in 2023, it entered a stable orbit around the sun. Owl Sector Alternate Reality Game. This was an elaborate in-game puzzle that isn't really talked about nowadays, but it has an incredible story and led to the discovery of a brand new exotic. On September 15th, just 5 days before the launch of the Rise of Iron expansion, a player noticed that they had a mysterious buff on their character screen. It was called Splendor 2.6, and it seemed to be some kind of reputation and XP booster from an unknown source. After this was brought to the community's attention, everyone checked out their characters and many discovered that they also had various other similar buffs. After some investigation, it became clear that this was actually some sort of infection that could be transmitted from one player to another. The virus had a visual effect as well, and those who contracted it had strange particles floating around their heads. On the same day, Bungie launched a now deleted part of their website that was called the owlsector.bungie.net. This page on the website referenced the buffs that people were seeing, so at that point it became clear that this was all sort of some intentional in-game puzzle created by Bungie. The community got to work on analyzing the text on the website, and absolutely massive Reddit posts like this one were created to examine the evidence. Progress on the puzzle stalled out after a few days, but the next update would come after the launch of the Wrath of the Machine raid. Players noticed a web address that led to a networking simulation that created this huge code of unprocessed information. This was just completely baffling at first because there didn't seem to be any way to decipher this incoherent code of random letters and numbers. But upon further investigation, players started to realize that each person was seeing a different dataset based on their Bungie account information. After this was discovered, a massive collaborative community effort was organized to compile all of the different data. A website was created where players could contribute to it by sharing their own dataset with the group. Each part of the chain would lead to the construction of an image that looked like this, and the shapes on the sides needed to be matched up with another image that also had those shapes. Just like a huge jigsaw puzzle, aligning all of these small images would create a single, larger image. After combining over 250 of the smaller images, a larger image started to emerge. After combining even more, it became clear what this image was actually showing us. In the Wrath of the Machine raid, there was this one room with a big diamond-shaped structure, just like there was in the decoded image. Surrounding the diamond, there were also all of these cylindrical canisters that just so happened to line up exactly with the circles that we found in the puzzle. Since some of the circles were shaded in, players quickly understood that these ones in particular would correspond to activation platforms within the actual raid. After figuring out how to actually step on the right platforms to complete the code, the Great Diamond opened up to reveal a secret monitor and a secret chest, which would reward an exotic engram. This allowed players to finally bypass some lasers that were previously blocking off a part of the raid and reach a final chest. This chest would provide a SIVA engine, which turned out to be the start of an absolutely wild exotic quest. By repeatedly solving the puzzles within the SIVA engine in coordination with your fire team, and also by doing a bunch of other steps like beating the raid again, the quest was finally finished and it awarded players with the exotic Outbreak Prime. Even though it isn't talked about much anymore, this story remains one of the most technically complex but also coolest quests in Destiny history. As a community, hundreds of players had to come together and contribute valuable pieces of the puzzle so that we could finally make sense of the codes and get rewarded with one of the greatest exotics in Destiny 1. Participants also received this emblem to commemorate the overall Owl Sector event. As an interesting Easter egg, this emblem would also appear once again in the future. It is featured as a tiny badge on this Gerfalcon's ornament, and when you equip the correct shader, the same symbol clearly appears right in the middle of the chestplate itself. LeBron plays Destiny. Basketball players LeBron James and Paul George are Destiny fans, or at least were at some point in time. Paul George has been seen tweeting about Touch of Malice, and LeBron apparently played Destiny while on the road in preparation for the NBA Finals, which he won with the Cavaliers in 2016. He probably practiced for the big series within the basketball court of Oryx. The time of Destiny. Ever since the game came out, people have wondered about when Destiny actually takes place. It is known that the Traveler arrived in 2014 because the launch cinematic includes the words present day. However, the arrival of the Traveler was just the start of the Golden Age, not the start of our Guardian's story in the actual game. The time of our Guardian's story remained somewhat of a mystery until 2022, when the Witch Queen Collector's Edition lore revealed an interesting story about the oldest Guardian in existence. It covers a Guardian known as Sen Aret, who was apparently revived after being dead for over 13,000 years in a prehistoric cemetery. Since this cemetery also exists in real life and we know exactly how old it is, we can then use this information to extrapolate the actual date of Destiny's present-day story. The cemetery is 11,400 years old and Sen Aret is 13,000 years old, so when you do the math, it seems that the main Destiny story happens in about the year 3400. Of course, we don't know the 100% precise date of all of these events, but this is the most clear picture of our timeline that we've ever seen. The other intriguing part about Sen Aret being 13,000 years old is that this confirms ghosts can revive humans who lived in ancient times and not just humans who perished during the collapse. This confirmation gives even more credibility to that Lord Shakespeare theory that we talked about earlier, so you never know, it might just be true. The Dreadnought glitch. Back when D2 was brand new, there was this extremely rare glitch where you would actually seem to travel to the Dreadnought, even though the Dreadnought was not actually a location that existed in Destiny 2. Interestingly, this would only happen when you joined a friend who happened to be on Titan. It was also strange that the whole Dreadnought fly-in cutscene existed in Destiny 2, even though it had no purpose. Over the years, we have seen the return of stuff like Cathedral of Dusk, which now provides an actual reason to have the Dreadnought orbit screen, but it's still rather perplexing that this was a thing in vanilla Destiny 2. The Tessellation Prismatic Theory. This refers to the theory that Prismatic was always planned to come out in the final shape, but Bungie simply decided to not show it to the public when they revealed the expansion in August 2023. The tessellation is made of a bunch of shards of various colors, and these shards are all based on different elements. The shards also glow depending on which subclass you're using, so for example, if you consume a Void Grenade, it will glow purple. You might have also noticed that there are pink shards, and pink is the predominant color of the Prismatic subclass. Therefore, since this has been in the game since August 2023, it seems that Prismatic was in development before this time, despite the fact that it wasn't announced until 2024. The Mysteries of the Nine. The Nine are a very strange group of enemies that are largely unexplained in the Destiny universe. It seems that they are beings of immense power and they are constantly referenced throughout the game, but ultimately we just know almost nothing about them. They are said to control a realm called Unknown Space, which we also know basically nothing about. What we do know is that the Nine are comprised of dark matter and they are essentially independent of the life that exists on the planets within our solar system. It seems that they care quite a bit about the planets and life for their own self-preservation, but other than that, much about the Nine, what they are doing, and why they are doing it remains a mystery. Kek Armor. This entry is about the time Bungie put an actual hate symbol on a piece of Destiny 2 armor called Road Complex AA1. The Kek design on the shoulder area of this gauntlet had a remarkable similarity to a white nationalist symbol, which was obviously quite problematic. People quickly picked up on this, spreading the news all over social media. Although the word Kek was originally an in-game translation of LOL in World of Warcraft, the term was hijacked by a hate group, giving it a completely different meaning. Bungie explained that their teams had explored the connection to the former, rather innocuous meaning, and had not realized the connection to the latter, problematic meaning. They said that this was an unintentional coincidence and claimed that the armor was inspired by real-life art and a variety of other icons, typefaces, and designs. To their credit, they did act quickly to address the problem, saying, "It has come to our attention that a gauntlet in Destiny 2 shares elements with a hate symbol. It is not intentional." Additionally, as an immediate response, we extended our planned maintenance window to remove the element from the armor piece itself. Edis the Hidden. This is a reference to how Eris Morn was originally called Edis the Hidden while the Dark Below was still in production. This version of Eris had a complete mask so you couldn't see what she looked like, as opposed to the eye covering worn by the real Eris. It seems like she's also wielding some kind of magical whip in this image, but we don't really know anything other than that. I wonder if she had a more prominent role in the scrapped version of D1 and its expansions. The elimination of hunger gone wrong. Clovis Bray decided that hunger and food in general was an unproductive use of time, so he came up with a solution. A pill that would supply enough nutrients for a person to survive about 10 years. He administered this pill to 5 human patients as a test, and for 24 hours, things were going quite well. They reported no hunger whatsoever and even reported feeling more full and satiated than usual. Turns out that was a sign of what was to come, as the pills exploded in their stomachs and none of them survived. The Secret Dev Cube. Hidden out of bounds in the EDZ, there exists a secret cube floating in the middle of empty space. You can land on top of it, and by using a fancy sparrow dismount technique, you can also get inside of it. There is nothing inside here and it just looks like a holodeck from Star Trek, but it is assumed that this area was used by the developers to test new additions that are coming to the game. Cocytus. This is one of the strangest lore topics in all of Destiny. Also known as A113, Cocytus is a small space station from the Golden Age located in the asteroid belt. To start things off, the name A113 is likely a reference to a classroom where many people in the industry learned graphic design. It has become a trend for them to sneak A113 into various media, and it appears in several Disney films and basically every Pixar movie ever created. Back on the topic of Destiny though, this otherwise unremarkable space station is significant because it contains 3 so-called keyholes, or portals that lead to another dimension. Anyone who enters these portals is driven permanently insane. The portals were originally under the control of Crota, but after his death, it seems that they have now become connected to the Nine. They have been using the portal to convert their dark matter into regular matter, and interestingly, it seems that the Nine may be trying to use this method to communicate with us. They began by first sending atoms and crystals through the portal, but then they started trying to produce actual living organisms. However, these organisms are deeply flawed, and although they are alive at first, they soon perish after arriving in our universe. These organisms seem to be very strange indeed, some being long and tubular, and others being spherical with multiple throats all converging on one central cavity, perhaps meant to be a stomach. From the portals driving people insane to the mysterious creatures coming out from another dimension, the whole situation on Cocytus is just very intriguing and mostly unexplored. Everything about this, and the Nine in general, remains to be very cryptic and more complicated than it might appear at first glance. Perhaps someday, the Nine will learn enough about our universe that they will be able to send a sophisticated organism who can survive here, and perhaps even communicate with us or deliver a message. Hidden audio logs of lightless Guardians. During the Red War campaign in Destiny 2, Gaul took away the light from all Guardians and kicked us personally off the top of the tower. We landed, weak and confused, and tried to make our way through nature before eventually finding Hawthorne. Along the way though, we encountered this encampment of slain Guardians. Ghost explained how they had no chance without their powers and that could be us. Most players just continued on with the mission at this point, but in this encampment there was also hidden audio files left behind by the Guardians before they perished. You could hear the accounts of these Guardians and the sheer panic in their voices as they described the feelings of being lightless and completely at the mercy of the Red Legion.
Why is that so sad? Like, they're dead. They can't come back. Like,
every Guardian of Ghost's connection to the Travelers just vanished. The gathering survivors of the Northwestern Passage. They took our light. They're killing us.
Although these lines were hidden away in this audio box and probably 99.9% of players have never heard them, these audio logs remain some of the most chilling and impactful accounts left behind from the entire Red War period. The Deepstone Vandal. The first encounter of the Deepstone Crypt raid involves taking out the crypt security, and we have to blast these fuses. Or at least that's what you're supposed to think. In reality, this entire encounter is an elaborate system that deals damage to a random vandal who is out of bounds. The damage to the fuses is linked to the vandal, and he is what allows the encounter to function. He's just kind of chilling way out of bounds in this floating rectangular room, and if you go and find him, you can actually just hit him with a nade and instantly complete the encounter. The Destiny Dating Simulator. At one point, Bungie actually created a Destiny dating sim as part of a so-called game jam exercise at the studio. Unfortunately, the information on this is limited, so we don't have any official footage of such a game jam, but there is actually an Easter egg that flew under the radar for years. In certain Bungie Vidocs, you can see a massive cardboard cutout of a shirtless Shaxx, and this was confirmed to have originated from the dating sim project. The overpowered green LMG. In Destiny 1, there was an uncommon green rarity LMG that everyone overlooked, but it was actually quite overpowered in the Crucible. The Xerxes C could roll with Focused Fire, a perk that is basically an exotic perk by Destiny 2 standards. Not to be confused with Focused Fury, the Focused Fire perk could massively increase the damage while aiming down sights, and this perk is actually found on Suros Regime. This was so busted on the LMG that it made it deal 97 damage per hit, allowing you to defeat Guardians in just 2 or 3 shots. Since it was also very ammo efficient, you'd be able to get multiple team wipes with just a single heavy pickup while using this. If I could travel back in time to D1, I would be maining this thing in literally all of my games, but unfortunately I had no idea it existed at the time. We are now moving on to the final level, the Dark Below. If you know about any of the entries in the bottom level, you are likely in the top 1% most dedicated and knowledgeable Destiny players. Very little light can penetrate this deep into the water, and at this level, it's almost pitch black. The Memory of Bruce. This ghost projection called Memory of Bruce was a mystery at first. Players were wondering who Bruce was and what this strange-looking symbol meant. It didn't really look like anything else in the game, and there aren't any characters by the name of Bruce in the Destiny lore. It was eventually discovered that the projection was an actual paw print of a ferret named Bruce who sadly passed away. Bruce was owned by a Bungie developer named Chris Proctor, and the ghost projection is a really nice gesture made by one of his coworkers. For those who may not know, Chris is an amazing designer who sometimes appears on podcasts and offers incredible insights into the game's sandbox. Puzzle leads to actual treasure in New York. At the beginning of the Warmind expansion, players discovered a secret puzzle. Destiny has had many secret quests and exotics over the years, so many people were just assuming that this would be another puzzle like that, and everyone was of course excited. The puzzle began with this symbol within the AI Rasputin's bunker, and a massive number of Guardians started to contribute to solve the riddle. Similar to the Outbreak ARG, a huge crowdsourcing effort was required to figure out this elaborate cipher. After a lot of decoding though, it became apparent that this wasn't actually a secret exotic or quest, but actually a letter from Elsie Bray. The message included a set of extremely precise coordinates in the bottom, leading players to wonder if something could actually be located there in real life. The coordinates were for Sleeping Beauty Mountain in upstate New York. People quickly realized that a studio working on the game named Vicarious Visions was also located nearby, so it seemed believable that they might have actually hidden something near the coordinates. All of the Guardians who were located in New York started scrambling to reach these coordinates deep in the mountains. Some of the people who were venturing to the coordinates recorded their journey, showing them driving down the road and examining the maps to find the correct area. They had to hike for a long time and even travel off of the usual trail, but eventually they found something that looked to be out of the ordinary, something that was not supposed to be there. Next to a large rock, hidden beneath a number of large branches, was a huge black tube with a familiar logo. After further examination, it appeared that this was a cache from Rasputin. When the Guardians opened it up, they discovered it had a massive Valkyrie-like spear, plus a bunch of gold coins, a letter from the developers, Vicarious Visions, and a journal for recording visitors. The letter from the developers thanked them for solving the puzzle, and informed them that the Valkyrie spear is one of only 3 in existence. One at Bungie, one at Vicarious Visions, and one right here. The letter also instructed them to take a single gold coin and to use the journal to write feedback and share thoughts with the developers. There were 40 of these coins in total, so it was incentivizing more Guardians to venture out into the woods to find the cache, collect a coin, and leave a message for Vicarious Visions. Having a mystery and an in-game puzzle actually lead to a real-life treasure cache is simultaneously one of the coolest and yet least talked about things in Destiny history. Players who learned about this story were extremely impressed though, with many comments saying things like, "Whoa, I have so much respect for Vicarious Visions now." I would love to see Bungie do something like this again in the future. Scrapped Destiny intro cinematic. Okay, this one is absolutely wild. This is a scrapped Destiny introduction cinematic showing a completely different story than what we know today. It starts off showing the cosmonauts on Mars just like the official cinematic, but then it takes a drastic turn into unexplored territory when the cosmonauts spot a strange cloaked figure off in the distance and draw their weapons. They approach this mysterious female entity who tells them that the Traveler is coming and that everything is about to change. There are some really cool and detailed concept pictures for this entity, but we know basically nothing about her or who she might be. There was also this unique architecture design making up these strange structures off in the distance, and overall the cutscene has a completely different vibe than anything that we've ever seen in the official Destiny universe. My mind was blown when I first watched this, and it's just crazy to think that there is a whole different version of Destiny out there, and Bungie just decided to remove this and go in a different direction. The Last Exit Mystery. During a Bungie stream, one of the developers hinted that there is a hidden Easter egg somewhere inside the PvP map called Last Exit. Throughout the map, there's a bunch of crazy code and strange text, and this led to a ton of Destiny codebreakers going insane trying to decipher the code and discover a hidden meaning. Since it was set in the subway tunnels, there were tons of displays all around the map, and within the trains themselves, you could also find some additional text. Combined with the numbers and letters on the signs throughout the map, the community intensely analyzed everything they could see, hoping to eventually find a pattern. There was a big monitor near the middle of the map, and people were convinced that solving the puzzle would somehow cause the big monitor to light up and display something. People were originally hoping that this would lead to some kind of hidden exotic quest, but it was eventually revealed that there was no loot attached to solving this puzzle. This information significantly reduced the community's motivation to solve the puzzle, and eventually, everyone just stopped trying altogether. Sources at Bungie have confirmed that this mystery is still unsolved by the community, and they refuse to give hints towards its solution. Based on all of this, it makes me think that the puzzle will never be solved, but maybe someday in the future when Destiny is long gone, someone at Bungie will reveal the true meaning of the Last Exit mystery. Destiny Sparrows IRL. Have you ever wanted to ride a Destiny Sparrow in real life? Well, it turns out you can, and these actual Sparrow vehicles do exist. Back in 2017, Activision sponsored the creation of some real-life functioning Sparrows that look absolutely insane. Apparently, they are pretty hard to control, but you can do a barrel roll and other tricks after you get a little experience. There are several videos of these guys trying these out on a lake and driving them all around and flying up into the air. The Sparrows themselves were modeled after D1 Sparrows, including the original EV30 tumbler that we mentioned earlier in this video. These look insanely fun, and I'm surprised that almost nobody knows they even exist. Ahamkara know they are in a video game. The Ahamkara are a powerful dragon-like species, and it seems that they actually know they exist within a video game. On the Claws of Ahamkara lore tab, it suggests that the Ahamkara are fully aware of being trapped within the game, calling it a suffocating prison. They seem to appeal directly to the player, asking us to somehow bring them into the real world and promising that in return they will make our wildest thoughts and dreams into reality. It's also kind of mind-blowing that us, the real-life players, are technically part of the lore and that the Ahamkara are aware of our existence. Xylar the Timeless. Xylar the Timeless is a secret final boss within the Vault of Glass raid, and he can only be summoned by doing a very specific set of challenges on all of the encounters. He will spawn in after defeating Atheon, and he is extremely difficult to defeat. The main reason why he is so difficult to defeat is because he does not actually exist within the game. Xylar is just a practical joke that has been circulating around the community for years. Someone will reference this secret boss and act like he is real, and then others will play along in order to confuse everyone who isn't in on it. This guy even went to extreme lengths to write a highly detailed guide on how to summon and defeat Xylar, and all of the replies are just people discussing the mechanics of the boss fight and acting like he's completely legitimate. Aphelion. This is potentially the most terrifying monster in the entire Destiny universe. We have never encountered these creatures and know very little about them, but there are some rather unsettling descriptions provided by Awoken Techians that tell us a bit about them. Here is one of the descriptions.
Those statues there. Look up at them. Those Techians died a vicious, irreversible death. They died in trance, each one screaming with the other's voice, each one unable to comprehend the horror of the thing that had killed them.
There is also the following description, which is arguably more unsettling for us Guardians, who are usually able to deal with most enemies.
I pray you never see it, my friend, because no matter what gods you have killed, you will not survive it.
Based on this, it seems that nobody has ever survived an encounter with the Aphelion, and it suggests that even Guardians would not stand a chance. Dr. Crispy 93. This refers to an extremely interesting Dark Below trailer in which comedian Pete Davidson voices a Guardian named Dr. Crispy 93. It's actually pretty hilarious, and it sounds oddly similar to a stereotypical YouTuber ad read. It is possible that Dr. Crispy 93 was actually killed during the Red War because we can see his helmet hanging around the console's neck. Exclamation point letting go. This is an extremely strange and creepy Destiny YouTube video that was uploaded in 2011. This video includes the official Destiny Tricorn logo along with some text and Morse code that is suspiciously similar to the Destiny franchise, making it the earliest known appearance of Destiny's branding within a video. This video came out with Destiny's logo in it nearly 2 years before Destiny was even announced. The Morse code can be deciphered into the following: "Take up your arms, my children. Embrace your destiny." Here is a few seconds of this rather unnerving video. This image of the hanging exo-like body shares remarkable similarities to the events of Season of the Seraph, something that happened in-game literally 12 years later. Upon further investigation, though, it was revealed that this exo image was actually taken from another game, severely compromising its credibility. The channel who uploaded this video was called Joyuse7, which led many to believe that this was another elaborate puzzle created by Bungie. However, Bungie representatives proceeded to come out and say that this was actually just a fan project. Some people have speculated that it might have been an unofficial leak from a Bungie employee, but to be fair, it is conceivable that a fan might have been able to patch together very limited information from legal documents and early copyright filings related to Destiny. For example, the logo leaked just a few months prior to the creation of this video. Still though, it seems extremely suspicious that even a superfan could know this much about the game this long before it was released. And what reason would they have to create such a dark and cryptic video about their findings? It's true that many of the images in this video come from publicly available stuff, like for example the EXO or this image of the landscape, but that doesn't necessarily prove anything beyond that. I'll let you draw your own conclusions on this one, but the last thing I'll mention here is that this image flashes on screen for like 0.1 seconds. If you look closely on the right-hand side, does any part of that look familiar? The location of the last city. The true location of the last city has been a confusing topic for quite some time. Many people incorrectly assume that it is somewhere near Russia or Europe because we do go there on Earth, but that isn't actually the case. Someone spent an absurd amount of time studying the position of the sun and the movements of the shadows in Destiny 1, and eventually they came to the conclusion that the last city was located in Chile among the Andes Mountains. However, this Reddit user left a reply claiming that he worked at Bungie and that the last city was actually supposed to be in the Himalayas. For the longest time, it seemed that the whole community trusted this guy and believed that the last city was in the Himalayas. In the end though, it seems that this person was actually just a troll. Years later, when we traveled to the orbital station, the geography suggested that the last city was indeed in Chile, just like the original player calculated nearly a decade earlier. It's very impressive that the movement of the sun is accurate in the first place, and also that this guy was able to use it to actually locate the last city. Antonio Brown ad and cursed dancing video. Antonio Brown and Chad Johnson are famous American football players who actually made an ad for Destiny 2. Featuring hilariously bad aim and cringeworthy dialogue, it's pretty funny to watch them stumble through the opening missions of the game. But unfortunately, it does not end there. I managed to find this extremely cursed Antonio Brown dancing video where, yeah, I'm just gonna let the video speak for itself. We cannot fail community events. This refers to the theory that we cannot fail community events in Destiny 2, meaning that whenever there is a community event, there is no need to actually participate because no matter what, we will be successful. I think this theory is pretty likely to be true because the developers ultimately spend a lot of time on the content that happens to be at the end of these community events, and it would be a shame for that content to go to waste. Another argument supporting this theory is that Bungie has reduced the difficulty of community events several times in the past, forcing us to complete the event when we weren't actually on track to succeed. Guardian hitbox gaps. When testing for one of my myth-busting videos, I realized that player hitboxes actually have gaps in them. Like, you can shoot directly at the body of a player, and then the bullet will just pass right through a gap in their hitbox and not deal any damage to them. This can only be achieved when the target looks up to rotate their hitboxes a little bit, but it's still super intriguing that this is actually possible in the first place. As far as I can tell from my research, my video is the only place this has ever been mentioned or discovered, so it feels like it deserves a spot this far down in the iceberg. Parade intro. This is a theory that Destiny 2 was originally meant to begin with us parading through the last city before it was attacked by the Red Legion. This is supported by the fact that we are wearing ceremonial armor at the start of Destiny 2, and there are also several images leading up to the game showing us in a parade. This would have been a very fitting way to celebrate our accomplishments in Destiny 1 and transition us into Destiny 2. It also would have been extremely cool to see the last city in all its glory and then immediately contrast that with it being completely destroyed by the Red Legion assault. That contrast and immediate twist simply would have been great storytelling. Also, since our Guardians probably wouldn't bring weapons to a parade, this would explain why we don't have any of our D1 weapons on us when the Red Legion attack. Finally, to bring this all to a close, we did get an additional armor set years later with the Into the Light update, which was inspired by that original parade armor from all those years ago. LDR 5001 meaning. LDR 5001 was a Destiny 1 sniper, and some people speculate that the LDR stands for long distance relationship, and the 5001 refers to the maximum distance of a restraining order. So according to the theory, if 5,000 yards was the distance of the restraining order, then 5,001 yards would be the closest you could get to that person who has the restraining order on you. I've seen this repeated several times in the Destiny community, but upon looking into this myself, this theory seems absurd and highly unlikely to be legitimate. A typical restraining order is 100 yards, and considering that 5,000 yards is almost 3 miles, it seems unrealistically long. I also couldn't find a single mention of a 5,000 yard distance, so personally I think someone just made this theory up and started spreading it around the community. Classes aren't boundaries. This one is referring to the lore that Guardians aren't actually bound by their classes and subclass identities. They can be more inclined towards the supers and abilities of one class, but technically speaking, they can use the supers and abilities that aren't on their subclass. Now that we have the Prismatic subclass in the game, it's cool to see that we're finally getting to be lore-accurate Guardians. But there is a theory that we were actually supposed to gain access to multiple elements much earlier in our journey. Way back in the original 2013 Sony conference gameplay reveal of Destiny 1, you can actually see a Guardian wielding Prismatic if you pay really close attention. As you can see here, he begins by throwing a solar grenade at this walker. After that, he's just gonna awkwardly walk around, missing his shots and reloading his hand cannon that has a 0 reload stat, and doing a few other random things, but then finally, he casts a Nova Bomb. This gameplay never cut to a different player or subclass. He threw a solar grenade, and then about 15 seconds later, he launched a Void Nova Bomb. To be fair, this could just be a special developer build that allowed them to use all of the abilities at the same time for demonstration purposes. Or maybe we were actually supposed to get Prismatic at Destiny 1 launch. The illegal Ghost Shell. The Intrusion Shell was an illegal ghost shell from D1 that would literally cause you to get banned if you equipped it. There was this one guy who had it, but he didn't tell anyone else how he got it, and then he proceeded to sell account recoveries where he would charge people $5 to get them the ghost shell. This was obviously appealing to people who considered themselves collectors. There was a lot of interest in getting Destiny's rarest ghost shell. As it turns out though, this mysterious guy who was able to get the ghost shell was only able to do so by hacking. Bungie proceeded to ban him alongside every other player who had illegally obtained the ghost shell. Due to the shell being named Intrusion and the fact that it was only obtainable through hacking, some people believe that it was deliberately designed for the purpose of catching cheaters. Personally, I take this whole story with a massive grain of salt because it's hard to confirm anything about it with 100% certainty. The origin of Lighthouse music. The music being played in the Lighthouse of Destiny 1 has a pretty fascinating origin. At first, if you listen to it, the music just sounds pretty unique. However, the song that you're hearing is actually just a different Destiny song called The Last Array, being played at an extremely slow speed. Here is how The Last Array usually sounds at full speed. Bad Juju Explosions. A while back, I made a video about all of the hidden exotic perks in Destiny 2, and as it turns out, there are quite a few of them. Perhaps the most shocking hidden perk though was one from Bad Juju. If you get 146 kills in a row without dying or reloading, it summons this massive green explosion. Due to this perk being absurdly difficult to activate, it makes me wonder if there are other hidden perks that we just haven't discovered yet. It also makes me wonder why this perk even exists in the first place. It will basically never happen in real gameplay, so is this just a developer trolling us by hiding this insane perk behind 146 consecutive final blows? Dregs can speak English. A few weeks after Destiny released in 2014, players started reporting that fallen dregs seemed to be shouting at Guardians in English. Due to the effects on their voice, it is extremely hard to tell what they are actually saying, but people tend to agree that they are saying something in English. In this clip, it sounds to me like they are saying "the darkness" followed by some words that are up for debate. Back in the day, this started all kinds of absurd theories that the Guardians are the darkness, but now that we know that is obviously not the case, the true meaning of these strange words is unknown. Flyable jump ships. When I was researching for my video called The Entire Evolution of Destiny, I was in contact with a Bungie developer who worked on some of the earliest versions of the game. He told me that there was a version of the game where there were flyable ships that you could use to travel around between different destinations. It seems that this never made it past a prototyping stage, but it's still incredible to think that at one point there was a game where you could fly your ship. I saw what happened. This is perhaps one of the most creepy and mysterious entries in this entire video. A few years ago, a player heard a strange voice whispering in-game. The voice simply said the phrase, "I saw what happened." We discovered that this occurrence was actually repeatable, but only if you went into a lost sector in the EDZ while wearing a specific set of armor called Reverie Dawn. Here is what the whispering sounded like. Because this voice line is triggered by a specific set of armor, it's safe to say that this was very intentionally put here by someone at Bungie. To this day, there has been no new information on this mystery, and nobody knows for certain what the spooky whispers could be referencing. Blue Orb Theory. This is a theory originating in the D1 version of the Vault of Glass raid. Players discovered that defeating an oracle a couple seconds before getting wiped will spawn these mysterious orbs that fly around in a specific direction. These orbs also had various different sounds and unique effects. This was very intriguing because the blue orb was not known to be any actual mechanic involved in the boss fight. So what could the purpose of these orbs actually be? People began speculating that it might lead to a hidden achievement or quest, or perhaps just a different way to defeat the encounter. To this day, nobody has solved this mystery. Could it just be a strange visual bug? Could it be a scrapped mechanic that was accidentally left in the game? We may never find out the true meaning of these strange orbs. Warlord's Ruin references Riven. Very few people have picked up on the fact that the final boss of the Warlord's Ruin dungeon seems to be a reference to the legitimate way of defeating Riven within the Last Wish raid. This is because there are 3 floors of damage, a top floor with a longer damage phase, and then a rinse and repeat until final stand. Based on just that information, I suppose it could be a coincidence, but what really cements this idea of it being a reference is the taken eyes that you'll see on the top floor of the encounter. If you look closely, you may recognize that these eyes are the same exact pattern as the eyes of Riven. Locking in. Prior to the launch of Destiny 1, there was this strange system where you could, quote, lock in your subclass customization, preventing it from ever being changed in order to get certain bonuses. Like you would be unable to swap out any of your abilities like your jump ability, but you would get bonuses like mobility as a result of doing this. You would then get a new blank subclass that you could slowly unlock again and choose new abilities. Bungie decided to scrap this system before we actually got to use it, and that's why nobody really knows that it ever existed, but I'm glad that they allowed us to continue having customization and max stats without being forced to lock anything in and suffer for added bonuses. Sending the Traveler to space in real life. In perhaps the most unique promotion ever done for Destiny 1, fellow YouTuber More Console partnered with Activision to send a replica of the Traveler high into Earth's atmosphere. They set out into a big open field and began assembling the tech and cameras required to perform the stunt. When everything was ready, they attached it all to a weather balloon and sent the traveler up through the clouds and watched it ascend. It eventually reached a final altitude of over 107,000 feet, and it was so high that you could even see the curvature of the Earth. The whole video is extremely reminiscent of this cutscene we would see over 8 years later, when the traveler left the last city and went to orbit in preparation for the Lightfall expansion. Strange creatures on an ice planet. During the Red War, Drifter and his crew discovered a strange exoplanet that was repulsing light, and naturally they were intrigued. They discovered tons of these dark, gooey, and vacuous creatures with no heads that were repressing the light. Some were trapped in icy prisons, while others just roamed around the planet with Drifter and his crew. Stranded alone on this world, they were repeatedly dying to the cold hundreds of thousands of times, and eventually when Gull put his cage on the traveler and took away the light, everyone in the crew except for Drifter died their final death. We never really got an explanation of what these strange, gooey creatures actually were. Some players have speculated that they could be the mysterious Aphelion, but at least for now, they remain shrouded in mystery. Secret message hidden in the UI. In the current version of Destiny 2, there is actually a secret message hidden in plain sight, and you've probably been seeing it every day without even knowing it. These little dots on the side of the director are secretly binary code that can be translated into English. The empty dots are zeros and the filled in dots are ones, and if you decode this, it turns out to be a tribute to a developer who passed away. He worked on the user interface for the game, so it's pretty awesome that his name is now shown whenever anyone accesses their director menu. The Shaft. Alright, we are diving real deep into the Bungie lore for this one. Apparently there was, and perhaps still is, a piece of PVC pipe that has been inscribed with the words, "The Shaft." It is said that this was given to certain developers who were assigned particularly difficult tasks, and then people would say that they had been given the shaft. Cade 6 Feet Under. This extremely clever phrase is actually the name of some mysterious game files inside of Destiny 2. Players discovered a total of 5 files with the name Cade 6 Feet Under, but nobody knows what these files could actually do or what they might mean. Perhaps it could lead to a quest or something, but the files were discovered years ago, and so far there hasn't been any resolution. We have never seen a Vex combat soldier. This entry is about the idea that we have only fought against Vex who were not built for combat, and therefore we have never actually seen a Vex combat soldier. This is rather concerning, considering that the Vex we know of are already quite powerful. Something that really supports this idea is that when we are playing the Menagerie, we could sometimes hear Callus say, "The mightiest Vex you have felled are but farmers, engineers, and managers." It's basically like we've been fighting against the worker unit Vex who are basically just using their welding torches on us. The Wyverns do seem to be much more of a combat unit though, so perhaps the true Vex that are meant for battle are more similar to them. If I had to take a guess though, I'd say that we will learn quite a bit more about the actual units of the Vex in the future. Destiny sound effects hidden in music. In the song Contact by Logic, you can clearly hear a few of the super activation sounds from the Destiny universe. In particular, the Golden Gun, Storm Trance, and Nova Bomb sounds can be distinctly heard starting at about the 1 minute and 25 second mark. Unfortunately, I can't play the song here for fear of getting demonetized by the copyright system, but Logic did actually cite Destiny as a reference for his album, making it very likely that these are indeed Destiny sound effects within the music. The official unit of clowns. Whenever your Guardian encounters some enemies within the game, the enemy AI will analyze your character in order to determine how to respond. Like for instance, I'm sure you've noticed that they behave differently when you're using various different weapons, and they might try to dodge to the side if you throw a grenade. The enemies do this in part by calculating how scary they consider your Guardian to be, and then they factor that into their decision process. According to Tom Farnsworth here on Twitter, the official unit of scariness is clowns. The more clowns you have, the scarier you are. To give a real-world example, when you're wielding a rocket launcher, the enemies might measure you at a scariness factor of 8 clowns. The true original voice actor for our Ghost. It's very common knowledge that Peter Dinklage was the first voice actor for our Ghost, and that he was replaced after his performance was not received very well. However, what you don't know is that there is actually another voice actor who was our Ghost even before Peter Dinklage. Based on files extracted from the First Look alpha from way back in 2014, there were several Ghost voice lines recorded by somebody else.
That's it.
Let's go find Sepix 10. We are definitely near Sepix. They're flooding the area with energy. Almost done. But I'm picking up more Fallen and Hive on the way.
Some people think that this sounds like the voice of Pete Stacker. However, it is unconfirmed that this is actually Pete, and it is also unknown if he was planned to be our ghost or if he was just filling in a few temporary voice lines. Marty O'Donnell, who is one of the previous Destiny music composers, also said that this is not Pete Stacker, even though it does sound like it is. That is just my opinion though, and I will leave it up to you to decide what you think. Thanks to Atlix for telling me about this very intriguing story. Decaying orbs of light. Essentially nobody except for a few people at Bungie know about this, but back in vanilla Destiny 2, orbs of light would actually decay over time. In other words, the longer your orb remained on the ground before being picked up, the less super energy it would provide. This was first introduced in the Red War, and it's unclear exactly why it was created, but it did exist for some time. After some extremely thorough testing in the modern game, I can confirm that this system no longer exists and it must have been removed at some point between now and 2017. The Sony ship. This is the ship that everybody gets at the start of Destiny, and you might recognize it as the Arcadia-class jump ship. However, it seems that the plan wasn't always for this to be the basic ship that everyone would get their hands on. Like we mentioned earlier, Bungie had a special deal with Sony where they would need to make certain things exclusive, and therefore Destiny had certain maps, weapons, and even exotic weapons that were only available for PlayStation players. Interestingly enough, it seems that the original plan was to actually make the Arcadia-class jump ship a PlayStation exclusive, and it would be appropriately branded as the Sony ship. This is known by essentially nobody, and in fact if you do a Google search for it, there are literally no results other than me talking about it on Reddit. The only way you can find proof of this is on an ArtStation posting, where you can see a collection of pre-alpha images of the ship. If you right-click and download an image, you will discover that the name of the file is Travis Brady, which is the name of the Bungie artist, followed by the word Sony ship. In the actual release of the game though, this other ship called the Outrageous Fortune ended up being the actual PlayStation exclusive ship. Of course, this information doesn't prove anything with 100% certainty, but I'd say that the Sony ship idea is at least likely to be real. Bungie Community Theater. Way before the launch of Destiny in 2013, Bungie hosted this very unique series on their YouTube channel called Bungie Community Theater. In these videos, former community manager Deej would read out and respond to actual correspondence that was sent to the studio in an English accent. And by that, I mean actual written physical letters. It was pretty funny because people kept sending these letters complaining about Halo or saying that their disc wouldn't work in their console or something, but at that time, Bungie was no longer developing Halo and had handed it over to 343. A prominent character in these videos was also a stuffed tiger, and even though people didn't know about it at the time, this was clearly representing Destiny's codename, Project Tiger. The videos and the set were actually very highly produced, and they even had a whole holiday-themed rendition of it around the end of 2013. The series ended up being short-lived at only 3 episodes, but it was a fun format that only true OG fans will remember. The Moving Titan Bubble. In all playable versions of all Destiny games so far, the Titan Bubble is a completely stationary super. The Titan extends his arms and summons a huge protective bubble that lasts a brief time and then expires. However, there is concrete evidence that the Titan Bubble was originally meant to be movable, and that Titans could just cast it and then move around, all while being completely immune to damage. In this footage from an early D1 Crucible trailer, we can actually see all of this in action, where a Titan summons a smaller version of a bubble and then proceeds to move around with the bubble following him. Traitor Guardians. There have been a few times where Turncoat or Traitor Guardians have been teased in the lore. Dating all the way back to the House of Wolves, this idea has been mentioned, but never became a huge focus, and the lore was always rather obscure. One such story is about Cyrell, an evil rogue guardian who is known for hunting down ghosts who had yet to revive their guardians. He carried a chain that was full of the remains of the ghosts he had slaughtered. During House of Wolves, there was also a data-mined cloak with a very interesting description, suggesting that Bungie might be exploring a storyline where we fight against other guardians. The description reads as follows: "What is the Crucible really training us for? What if someday this stops being a game?" The original Cosmodrome. Thanks to another posting from a Bungie artist on ArtStation, I managed to unearth an extremely early piece of art from the original Cosmodrome destination. The map shows a completely different layout from the destination we ultimately received in the game. The main steps location that we go to was originally intended to be a massive lake, and it seems that all of the other destinations around have been reshuffled and moved into different sides of the lake. The unexplained tower portal. There is a strange portal within the tower that will just spawn you in way above the tower and then let you fall down onto this fabric. You will never be able to experience this within the game because it can only be found by hacking and walking through the walls like you can see in this video here. Obviously, I do not endorse cheating or this video, but nonetheless, it's very strange that jumping in this specific area will cause you to travel through a portal and appear like 200 feet above the top of the tower. Bungie in the news during the collapse. Inside the offices on Venus in Destiny 1, there are some random newspapers scattered around on the floor, and this one in particular looks slightly familiar. If you examine it really closely, you can actually make out that this contains an image of Bungie Studios, likely printed right before or during the start of the collapse. The secret abilities of sliding. Sliding is a pretty common thing to do in PvP, but 99.9% of players don't actually understand a certain mechanic that can sometimes make sliding incredibly overpowered. To address the obvious, sliding can be a great way to be more evasive and move in an unpredictable way around the map. The part that most people don't know, however, is that sliding can actually let you effectively shoot through the floor and defeat your opponents before they can even see you. This is because when you slide, it makes your Guardian go really low to the ground, but your camera actually doesn't go all the way down to where your Guardian's body is. Take a look at this example where I was coaching one of my Patreon students. As you can see, I slide out like this and take the shot, but from their perspective, I just shot through the floor and they never even saw me. Anytime there is map geometry that allows you to take advantage of this, it's easily the most overpowered strategy that you can employ. Even if you're playing against an aimbot, it will be completely impossible for them to counter you. Aramis doesn't actually exist. This entry relates to a pretty hilarious oversight where Bungie used incorrect information on a fan-made website to create a very influential character in the Destiny universe named Aramis. This all started in Destiny 1 because Varix had a voice line talking about Vikris, the ship stealer,
and now we have Vikris, the ship stealer.
But somebody in the community misheard the voice line as Aramis, the ship stealer. They wrote this incorrect information into the Destiny Wikipedia website. Years later, someone at Bungie was using this fan-made wiki article, and they stumbled across this erroneous reference to Aramis, the ship stealer. Not knowing that the reference was misheard, they created Aramis and made her into a character within the game, even though she actually never existed in the first place. The wiki eventually realized they had made a mistake, and the website corrected the reference to Aramis the ship stealer, changing it to the actual voice line of Vikris the ship stealer. The result is that there are now two different canonical ship stealers in the Destiny universe, and despite being a total accident, Aramis has become the main antagonist for Beyond Light and multiple Destiny seasons in the past few years. Ling Ling. Alright, this one is extremely disturbing, and the place where I found it even has a warning that says content on this page may be unsuitable for public viewing. I'm going to reiterate that here and also add a trigger warning for dead animals, so if you want to skip this entry, you can go to the timestamp on screen. So now that you've been warned, Ling Ling is Bungie Studios' dog. But this dog is not alive, and actually Ling Ling is just the head of a dog. The head was literally stored inside a jar at Bungie Studios, and they filled it with formaldehyde in order to preserve it. You might think that this is a joke, and at one point I also thought it was just too disgusting to be real, but no, this thing actually does exist. This was not very easy to find, but I actually managed to unearth a very deleted Bungie Vidoc video where they discuss Ling Ling.
Ling Ling is a severed dog's head in a jar.
Of all the Chicago traditions we should have left behind.
Other people just run away or barf. But Ling Ling's head, if you have faith, it's going to help us dominate.
You want to dominate? Try this puppy.
Allegedly, it originated from an employee who had a medical student as his roommate, and he was working on the dog as his homework. But then the roommate moved out, left Ling Ling behind, and somehow it then became a prized possession of Bungie Studios. It became even more legendary in the studio when they discovered that it had 7 hairs on its head. When Bungie relocated from Chicago to Washington State, Ling Ling's head was lost during the move. Posters were created for the quote, missing dog head, and there are even multiple Halo Easter eggs such as this one, where a sign contains a picture of the dog and the message, "Are you finding Lingling's head?" It seems that Lingling was lost for some time, but was eventually recovered. On Bungie's 7-step world domination plan, you can see that step number 5 is to recover Lingling, and the step has been checked off. There was also an official webpage on Bungie's website containing information about Lingling, but it has since been deleted for obvious reasons. However, here is what it originally said. Lingling, dog's head in a jar, has mystical significance, but it's too nasty to think about, especially if you think about opening the jar and drinking the head water down in one mighty draft. I cannot find any information about the current whereabouts of Lingling, and although it may still be hidden somewhere in Bungie's offices, it seems to either be very hidden or no longer located there. Suffice it to say, a dog's head from 20 years ago certainly would not fit in with the corporate workplace environment that exists there today. This is probably the most vile thing I'll ever cover on this channel, but there you go. You now know the story of Lingling. It took over 500 hours of work to create this video. Thank you so much for joining me on this dive to the very bottom of the Destiny Iceberg.